Hello, 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 everyone. Welcome, welcome. I hope everyone had a good day today. You're all good there, Chris. You got 2 minutes, okay? 2 minutes. Hope everyone had a good day today. It was extremely hot where I live. Yeah, I actually remembered to turn on captions. Wow. Yeah, it was so hot out today. I took a shower after work, not because I'd actually like done anything, but just because just I felt gross in general. I think the heat index got up to 104 degrees Fahrenheit, like felt like 104 degrees Fahrenheit here where I live. Hey, Scotty. I hope all of our UK and European viewers are doing okay with all the heat and everything. I know that their real temperatures have gotten that high versus just the heat index here. Hey, Dev Drive, welcome. Oh, that sucks you're feeling sick, Chris. Yeah, it could be the temp change. Who knows? Yeah. Yep, I was just saying it. Yeah, awful weather, bad heat, and all that. Oh, thank you, Micah. Thank you so much. I really appreciate it. Hey, Hertz. Yeah, no worries. Go finish up that VOD. All right. Well, the time is nigh. The hour is 7 p.m. Oh, Scotty. Thank you as well. Yeah, thank you so much, both of you. I really appreciate it. Hello, welcome. Hey, no problem, Micah. Yeah, that's why I record the VODs because I know there's a lot of folks that, can't tune in live, that might be on the catch-up crew. Yeah, there's all sorts of reasons why people, might prefer the VODs or need to watch the VODs. And so, yeah, that's why they're there, definitely. Oh, yeah, bad allergies. Oh, that sucks. Hey, Laylo, welcome. So today we're going to kind of have like a two-part stream. The first part that we're going to do is we are going to go through this tutorial from Free Code Camp on just kind of as a refresher for us on callbacks, traditional promises, and the newer syntax of async await. I think this will definitely be good for me. I think it'll be good for all of us. Promises are still one of the things that I'm not super like I don't have a super awesome grasp of. I can use them, but I'm not like super confident about it. Um, and so I think this will be good if we just go through this tutorial together. I'm not expecting that this will take a terribly long time. I've already read through it. It's not a terribly complex tutorial, but I do think it does a good job of just touching on, each of these components of what makes up a promise. So, starting with callbacks, evolving to promises, and then async await. So I think it's a decent tutorial and not too in depth. And so the second part of today's stream is going to be taking the existing full stack template that I made several streams ago that used MongoDB client and all that, and upgrading that to use not only Mongoose but also async await where appropriate in a few places. So we're going to do a few things with the template. We're going to upgrade it to Mongoose. We're going to add a schema, just like a default schema template. We're going to change some of the methods and stuff to reference Mongoose instead. And then we're also going to add some async await notation just sort of for practice, and make other little improvements to the template. So the original version of the template will still exist. And it's not going away because I know I've seen how many people have forked it, and I don't want to I don't want to screw that up for anybody that's using the original version of the template for their app or their project. And so we're going to have a new version that's clearly marked as Mongoose based, and it'll just be, just a revised version 2 of the template. So that's what we're going to do. Welcome, Artfire. Or Artfire, yeah, welcome, Artfire. Thank you, Rascal, for sharing the link to the tutorial. I'm a Meat-Cotton. I'm glad you're excited. Yeah, this stream should be fairly chill today. I want everybody to feel rested and not too, overwhelmed for class tomorrow, but I still want us to feel prepared. So I figured, why not do a review? Why not and then, the second part of this stream. So the first part of the stream is going to be a promise review. Second part is going to be more of like a, full stack template review type thing. What are the components? How do we modify it? That kind of thing. So we're going to get a nice wide ranging review this evening, I hope. Let's see, making sure I didn't miss anything here. What a topical tutorial. Ice cream. Yeah, exactly. Ice cream seems appropriate for the type of weather that most of the world seems to be, or the Northern Hemisphere anyway, seems to be having right now. So, yeah. Captain, oh, your work got canceled today. Oh, you're able to watch live. Well, it's good to have you here. Hey, L2, welcome. Twitch commercial was for the new Nope movie trailer. Yeah, I actually just read the New York Times review on that. They say it's really good. Kind of looking forward to it now. I loved Get Out, and I didn't love Us quite as much, but I think the reviews for Nope seem to be that it's fantastic. So looking forward to that. Hey, Kosovo, welcome. We just went through kind of what we're going to cover on today's stream. We're going to start, short answer is we're going to start with this tutorial here that I have pulled up, and then the second half of the stream is actually going to be going back to my full stack template and modifying it to use Mongoose, async await, and have a schema associated with it. So that's kind of the plan for tonight. We'll see how long that takes us. Oh, what film? The film is called Nope. It's by Jordan Peele, the director of Get Out. That really good film from a few years ago. Just really great film, horror. He's branched out into being kind of a horror sci-fi director, and I'm really excited about it. Yeah, and the movie wasn't bad. It was just kind of, maybe not, I didn't think it was as good as Get Out, but I'm not saying it was bad. It was still highly entertaining. Yeah. Hey, Mavi, welcome. Okay, so let's go ahead and get into it, I think. Yeah, the Twilight Zone reboot was, but, I think, he's a little hit or miss, but he hasn't directed that many things. So, I mean, I'm willing to cut the guy some slack, definitely. Okay, so let's get into it. We're going to do a tutorial today, for starters. Like I say, just because promises are something I'm not super 100% comfortable with yet, and so I think let's go back to basics. Let's review everything, do some practice examples, and then we'll apply them to my full stack template. A lot of the imagery in this tutorial is very cutesy, which is not a bad thing, of course. It's not my usual thing that I enjoy, but I think it's kind of cute. So yeah, this is going to be a very cutesy tutorial, but the material it covers is actually pretty good. So hey, Snarfin. Okay, so today we're going to build and run an ice cream shop and learn async JavaScript at the same time. Oh, and I know Rascal shared it before, but I know some folks have joined us since then. I'll share the link again. Yeah, Rascal, there's only a couple things we're gonna use async await for in the full stack template. The other main thing we're gonna do is also just add Mongoose. So yeah, it's not gonna be super involved. It's not a full rebuild by any means. Yeah, it's just going to be a light modification. Yep. Hey, Cranberry, welcome. Okay, so we're gonna build an ice cream shop. We're gonna use callbacks, promises, and async await. So the things we're gonna cover are what is asynchronous JavaScript, sync versus async, how callbacks work, how promises work, and how async await works. So, which I think that's pretty much all we want to know, right? Oh, Zena, thank you. Yeah, no, it's good. It's good to review these types of things. Mongoose makes inputting data from the client so much easier. Yeah. Mongoose has a lot of, additional features. And like I've said before, I feel like Mongoose is, every time I've not used Mongoose on a stream, I inevitably get so many questions. Why not Mongoose? Are you using Mongoose? Is this Mongoose? And so finally I was like, okay, maybe I should just start using Mongoose because that sounds like something I should know. So yeah. So no, no 6-hour stream, disappointing. Yeah, no, I can't do 2 of those in a week. Yeah, no. All right, so and this tutorial is available on YouTube if you're more of a video person. So later on, you can always go back and catch it on YouTube as well. But we're gonna do the written version for today. All right, so what is asynchronous JavaScript? So async JavaScript helps us break down complex projects into smaller tasks. We can use callbacks, promises, or async await to run those small tasks in a way where we can get the best results. Rascal says, that's what encouraged me to finally go full test-driven development. Fine, I'll try it out. Yeah. After you've had enough people bug you about something, you're finally like, fine, I'll do it. They shut up about it, right? Yeah. Hey, Nachakal, welcome. All right, so let's first review what is a synchronous system. So synchronous is where tasks are completed one after another, one at a time. And so, for example, with this GIF here, we've got 3 images loading. The first image is load, then the second image loads, and then the third one loads. So they don't load at the same time. The next one only loads after the first one is done. And so JavaScript is by default synchronous or single threaded. We've heard that term before, right? Leon has mentioned, threads and how JavaScript is by its very nature a single threaded language. And excuse me. And so it can't, really multitask. It does one thing at a time. Yeah, and blocking. Yeah, so synchronize. One thing has to complete before the next thing can happen, right? Yeah. So in contrast to that, then what is an asynchronous system? So in asynchronous system, tasks are independent of each other. So if we have 10 tasks, we can do all of them at the same time, independent of each other, not relying on each other, just all happening at once and finishing, without regard to any of the other tasks. Here's, an alternate example. We can see in this GIF that all 3 images load at the same time, and they all finish at slightly different times as well, but that doesn't matter. It doesn't matter which one finishes first. They all start and finish whenever they're done, right? Hey, back into balance. Welcome. Good. I'm glad this was the topic that you were looking forward to. So yeah, all of the images are loading at their own pace. None of them is waiting for any of the others. So quick review here. Synchronous means one at a time, reliant on the thing before it to finish. And asynchronous means independent, not reliant on any other tasks, and occurring at the same time as those other tasks. So synchronous, inline, asynchronous, independent of each other, right? Those might be, good vocab words to have in your brain for, interview type stuff. If you can, clearly articulate synchronous versus asynchronous, that could come in handy. You never know. So yeah, here's a good visual, and here's another good visual summary of this. GIF, yeah, I do say GIF, so if that's gonna bother you, you're gonna have to jump off right now. Yep, I ain't saying no GIF. Oh, and somebody played a hydrate earlier. I'm gonna take advantage of that. Sorry for sorry I missed that. Thanks, Ruhal Sebastian, for the hydrate. The old JRaffics interchase format, exactly. Oh boy, okay. We got a poll, okay. I'll get that going. 2 seconds. Won't take long at all. That's a good poll. I like that poll idea. Oh, come on. Poll. There we go. How do you pronounce? All right. If hard. Let's see. GIF. There we go. All right. Or GIF. There we go. Okay. Poll is starting. You have 5 minutes to make your stand. Okay, poll is running. You can click on the poll at the top of the chat if you want to participate. All right, with that, let's get back to learning, shall we? Although we are going to learn how many people, are on the side of righteousness and how many are on the side of darkness by the results of this poll. I used both. Someone told me that made me a monster. I use both, swapping between them, making both sides equally happy and unhappy, perfectly balanced, as all things should be. Oh, goodness gracious. An anonymous gifter just gave out 10 subs. What the what? Anonymous person, you are a wonderful anonymous person. Holy cannoli. Thank you so much. I wish I knew your name so I could thank you, but regardless, it's still very much appreciated. Thank you. Oh yeah, the poll. So the poll. Look in the chat where you're typing now. Go up to the top and just click on it there, and the poll will drop down, and you can choose your option from there. Oh my goodness, you're gonna get to hear that dingy that sub sound 10 times, which I think is awesome because anonymous gifter, you deserve that sound effect. Incredible. And somebody was saying something just before the chat. I'm gonna scroll up to make sure I don't miss anything. Yeah, and Mavi gave a great example of synchronous versus async. So synchronous tasks are kind of like an ordered list, right? You have to do the thing before you can do the next thing and the next thing and the next thing. And so whereas async tasks can just happen anytime. Yeah, there's no option for both in the poll. You're gonna have to take a stand. I'm sorry. All right. Okay, there we go. So much wholesome, indeed. Yeah, that's the best part. I love my chat because I never have to police y'all. My auto mod never has to do anything. I've got auto mod set up, but it never does anything because y'all are too squeaky clean. Thank you again for the subs, whoever you are. Again, I really appreciate it. All right. Okay, so yeah, let's just summarizing synchronous versus async real quick. So in the synchronous system, these 3 colored images are in the same lane and they cannot pass each other. So like cars in a traffic jam, they're stuck in the order where they started. So if task 2 here gets hung up for some reason, then this red task here cannot complete, right? It's stuck. However, with async, they all have their own lane and they can finish at whatever time they finish. Yeah, so I think we get it. Let's do a couple of examples here. So before we start our project, let's look at some examples and clear up any doubts. Hey, Bumpy. Let's clear up any doubts. So let's test some code. And I'm going to run it in VS Code, but you could run it in CodePen or Glitch or wherever you'd like. We'll just dump it in here, and we have 3 console logs. So we would expect, right, that these items are going to log themselves in the order in which they were written, right? So I'm going to save it and run it. And we can see that it does exactly what we expect. So I logs first, followed by eat, followed by ice cream. And so that, you know, they basically went in order and in the order that they were written. Don't run in Notepad. If you want to, it's all you. Oh, and sorry, somebody else played a hydrate. I'll get that. All right, so let's say it takes 2 seconds to eat some ice cream. Now let's test out an asynchronous system. So we'll write some code below. And we're basically just going to change our eat console log to have a timeout function associated with it. So we're going to set a timeout, and it's going to log console log eat after 2000, I believe these are milliseconds. So let's see what happens when we run this. Clear my console here. Oh, I didn't save it. Of course. I was like, wait, why did that work? Yeah, I didn't save it. All right. Oh, I must be missing a parenthesis. Hang on. Good start, right? Maybe I had something highlighted. There we go. I had accidentally highlighted something. Oh, Captain, thank you for the Prime sub. Yeah, no, I got it. I accidentally dragged my mouse over and highlighted before I clicked run. So that's what did it. Yeah, Snarfin, I could, you know, but then someday I'll be in a situation where I don't have autosave, and then I will be screwed. So it's best for me to remember to save myself, I think. But yes, the Prime Captain, thank you for the Prime sub. Spend those Bezos bucks whenever you have them. I also ice cream eat, indeed. Oh yeah, what was the poll results? I just totally missed it. Hang on. Few results. I'm looking. Holy cannoli. Yeah, so GIF is the winner. Wait, no, GIF. No, GIF. It's GIF. It's not GIF. What are y'all are nuts. What's wrong with you people? It's GIF with a G, not GIF. Okay. Okay. I don't know how to feel, but I guess I'll still stream for you. Just highly disappointed. I'm not mad, I'm just disappointed. No. I'm kidding. I'm still gonna say GIF though. Yeah. Gotta control S the standard 4 times to make sure it's saved. Yes, exactly. Okay, so, but back to this. So what happened here, right? So we set a timeout and our code ran in a different order than before. So what happened was, well, instead of, you know, we still have our code in the same order, but what this timeout did is it seemed to kind of remove this particular console log from the queue, right, from the race, and made the end result appear in a different order. So we'll come back to that later, but that's, you know, an example of asynchronous functionality. All right, let's get into something more interesting. I always love practical examples more than theory, so this will be better if we can have a practical way to demonstrate this kind of thing. Oh, we got another hydrate. Man, y'all are coming in fast and thick with the hydrates today. All right. I've got a big mug though, so we should be okay. Plenty of tea. Oh, good thing we got breaks every hour. I'm gonna need a restroom break after. Come on. Y'all. All right, hang on. Okay, 1, 2. You're killing me. Oh God. I'm not gonna chug it if that's what you're wanting. Not happening. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Okay, I'm 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Getting them curls in. Yeah, this is a heavy mug. Okay. Never acknowledge Twitch chat doing something you don't know the response. Yeah, I thought I had a cooldown on that, but I guess not. That'll teach me. Um, do companies ever use defer scripts? I saw them in the bank, but haven't come across them. Yeah, I would be curious if anybody else has experience with JavaScript in a production environment. If you've ever seen that kind of thing. Oh yeah, and save your points for to name a kitten too. Okay, so let's go ahead and start a project. I'm going to clear my console here. And let's first learn what is a callback. I'm sure we've heard the term before. Some of you may have seen them or even used them. But a callback is when you nest a function inside of another function as an argument. So here's an illustration. First, we declare a function, or function 1, which does something. And then we have function 2, which allows us to call function 1. So in the end, what we can do is so it passes function 1 in as a parameter, and then after function 2 is done doing what it does, it calls function 1, right? So in practice, that would look like this. Function 2 with function 1 contained inside of it passed in as an argument. So why are callbacks important? Well, or why might we use them? When we're doing a complex task, we can break that task down into smaller steps. And so sometimes we want to make sure that our tasks have a certain relationship with each other. And we can establish that relationship according to time or order. So here's an example. Making ice cream. So certain things have to happen in a certain order. When someone is, ordering ice cream or making ice cream. So the order is placed, we cut the fruit, we add water and ice, we start the machine, we select a container, select toppings, and serve. So in this case, our step order and our timing order is very important, right? So you can't just place the order, cut the fruit, and then serve that. That's a fruit cup, that's not ice cream. And so sometimes we, in the same thing in our code, sometimes we want to, ensure that our timing and our order of steps are always appropriate and executed correctly in the correct way. And if a previous step is not completed in this example, right, we can't move on to the next step. So if the ice cream machine breaks, we're going to have to wait for it to be fixed before we can, finish making the ice cream, put it in the container, and give it to the customer. So that's important, right? We need to have things happening properly, and the rest of the steps need to stop if a previous step has not finished executing yet, right? We'll redeem a bathroom break later. Well, you're gonna have one on the hour. That's how we do things here. If you're new, we take breaks on the top of every hour or after every hour, roughly, and have a nice 5-minute break to do whatever you need to do. All right, so with this in mind, order of steps is important, timing of steps is important, and things always have to happen in this particular order. With that in mind, let's go ahead and set up an ice cream cafe. So we're going to have 2 components to our store. Our shop will have 2 parts. The storeroom will have the ingredients, our back end, and we will produce ice cream in our kitchen, which is the front end. Okay, pretty clear, right? Ingredients are stored in the cooler in the back, and then we make the ice cream in front of the customers up front. So we're going to store our ingredients inside of an object. So we're going to set up an object. And inside of that object, we're going to have a list of fruits. We're going to have our key here for fruits, and then it's going to hold an array with a list of fruits inside of it. This is good practice for objects too. We haven't done just like basic like object construction in a while, I think, and so it's easy to sometimes forget, what is this? Well, it's an object. What's inside of it? Well, we've got, a key, and then our value here is an array. Yeah, so remember that objects can hold arrays, and those arrays can be held, within a single reference point here, which is this key. Yeah, that's right, Rascal. We've been making our databases do this for us for a long time now, or a couple months, I think, at least. We've been having our databases have kind of built our objects for us, right? They've held our documents, and so doing this manually is good to remind ourselves, what is this and why do we need it? Thank you for sharing that link, by the way, Rascal, as well. Okay, so this is our backroom stock that we have here, and we have some additional ingredients as well. So we've got fruits, and we're also going to have some liquids, in this case water and ice. We're also going to have some holders, which can be a cone, a cup, or a stick. And we have some toppings, in which case can be chocolate or peanuts. Personally, I would think there would be more toppings than that at any reputable ice cream place, but who knows? Maybe they're just getting started. I'm not gonna, not gonna haze them, but yeah. I personally would maybe like some, M&Ms or something like that, but not gonna be too picky. Yeah, Rascal, that's another good point. So, in addition to using form, we're able to use form now to build objects for us as well, and building objects from the client. Yeah, using fetch. Yeah, exactly. Mochi, gummy worms, cookie dough. Yeah, all these additional things that we could do as well. Feel free to add those to your version if you want to make it a better ice cream shop. Yeah. Okay, so these are this is kind of our stock. This is what's in our freezer in the back. But the business itself depends on what the customer orders. So once we have an order, so we have to have an order first, that has to happen. We start production, and then we serve our ice cream. So we'll create two functions, one for orders and then one for production. So first we get an order from the customer, we fetch the ingredients, we start the production, and we serve. Okay. So we're going to have two functions. One of them is going to be order. So this is another thing we maybe haven't done in a while either. It's just writing a straight up arrow function, right? Go free. Oh my goodness. Thank you so much for the sub. Man, it is a sub-a-palooza today. I really appreciate it, y'all. Thank you. This is incredible. This might be, I don't know, we're only like, what, a half an hour in? This is like the most subs I've ever had in a stream, I think. It's wild. Thank you. Oh, thanks, Go Free. Making it rain. Yeah, never feel obligated to sub. You're welcome to sub if you'd like to, but please, I'm never going to beg for subs. I'm never going to, do any of that. I want y'all to be able to experience my stuff for free, and then just like Leon, right? You can experience my stuff for free, and if you would like, you can sub, but that's never going to be something I'm going to ask for from you. So just, putting that out there just in case, don't feel bad if you don't want to, can't, whatever. That's never going to be something I'm going to ask for from you. But I appreciate everyone who does. Thank you. Oh my gosh, another hydrate. What are y'all doing? Come on. Hmm. Whew. Welcome, MJ. Have I tried Run.js? No, I haven't. We're doing everything in vanilla JavaScript, just for learning purposes. But yeah, I know there's a ton of other, plugins and all that sort of thing I can be using. Just, while we're picking up skills, I like to do vanilla as much as possible. Yeah, and Rufio, I think, has experimented more with that kind of thing because Rufio's been doing this stuff much longer than I have, actually. They were on the original cohort. 5 o'clock somewhere. Don't want those stinky ads. Yeah, that's true. Okay, so we've set up our shop, right? Now let's set up our 2 functions that we're going to need for getting orders from customers and then producing the result of those orders. So first function is just going to be called order. And being an arrow function, it's going to have this general syntax. I think it's also good to remember the syntax of an order function, right? We set it equal to a variable. We declare our variable here, and then the general syntax of an arrow function is we have a parameter of some kind, right? Then we have the arrow, and then we have the function body. In production, our production function is going to be similar. Parameter. And we can make anonymous arrow functions as well, but for the purposes of this, obviously, we're going to want to label these. How you been on the YouTube videos? Good, go free. Yeah, the YouTube videos are definitely great too because it can help you avoid ads as well when you want to revisit the VODs. So !YouTube for my YouTube channel. If you want to be able to watch my past videos without Twitch cramming ads down your face. Oh, Run.js is just a run code? Okay. Is it this? I'm using a run code extension. I don't remember what it's called. I know we just went over this my last stream, but I have the brain span of a goldfish, so. Oh, stretch. Okay. Yep. There you go. Oh, thanks, Mavi. Yeah. Hey, Goofer. Welcome. Oh, it's an app with 2 columns, code in the output. That's awesome, MJ. Yeah. Oh, I'm using Code Runner. Okay. Yeah. Well, I think you can. So with this, I know I can change the layout of my VS Code window so that I can have my output be on the right. You can actually make this a dual column display in VS Code, which I would do if I was using my full wide monitor. But with the fact that we're squishy screen here with another window, I think that wouldn't look too good. However, yeah, I think you can change this layout so that the columns are side by side. Okay, so this is a basic arrow function syntax, right? Now, we want our order function to always go first, right? If the customer places an order, that has to come first. They have to place an order before we can start producing the ice cream. So, in order to do that, we are going to use somebody complete my sentence. What are we going to use? If we want to force the order of operations here. Hey, Goofer. No, you haven't missed much at all. Well, Async Await, yes, but we're not quite there yet. What's the simplest way that I could do that without dealing with Async Await? Right, yeah, we're going to use a callback. Exactly. We're just going to use a call. We have 2 functions here. We just want one to go before the other. We want to establish that relationship. And so the simplest way to do that with just these 2 items is probably, we're just going to do a callback. So in order to execute this callback, I'm going to pass the name. Essentially, I'm going to be passing the second function into the first one as I'm going to have a parameter for it, and then I'm going to pass it in as an argument when I actually call the first function. So remember the difference between parameters and arguments, right? So a parameter is essentially just the placeholder that tells us, hey, something's going to go in here. So my parameter here is going to be called call production. And then this function could does stuff, right? It does some stuff, and then when it's done, it's going to act on that, whatever we've passed in, and execute it, right? So it's forcing an order of operations. Yeah. Okay, so that may be, you may be still like, what's actually happening here? So let's go ahead and test this. So we can test the relationship that we've created now between these two functions, right? All right, so order call production, and we're gonna add a console log in here. We're gonna say console log order has been placed, production can start. And then after that, we're essentially going to call the production function. And we don't have to pass anything into production as a parameter and then subsequently as an argument. Production will just start once it's called, right? So console log production started. All right, now how do we call this then? So to run the test, we call the order function, we call order, and then we pass in the name of the second function as an argument. Oh, I cannot spell, my goodness. There we go. All right, so let's just walk through real quick what's happening here. So we passed in just the name of the function, right? We didn't say this. We didn't do that, right? We didn't call it immediately. All we did was pass in the function name, and when this function runs, so order production gets passed in, console log runs, and then essentially in the purpose of execution, the call production parameter is replaced with the actual function name, and then the function executes, right? Well, go free. So yeah, so call production is just the name of the parameter. It's just making it clear what's happening here, right? Yeah, and the thing that we're passing in is what matters. Exactly, Goofer. Yeah. So you could call this, I don't know, unicorn, sparkle unicorn, or whatever, like Leon sometimes does. It's just a name, and then what matters is what we pass in when we actually execute. All right, so let's see what happens. And we'll go ahead and save this and run it. Yeah, so clearly our order runs first and our production starts after that. And since we've kind of forced this order, we've ensured that our tasks are going to happen in the correct order, right? We force the order by forcing a callback only after this order function has done what it needs to do. So we could have a bunch of things that actually happen here versus just a console log, right? We're just doing a console log for the purposes of example. But we could have a bunch of very important things that are happening in here. And then only after that stuff is done does production get called and start executing. Hey, Driftwood, welcome. All right. Does that make sense, what we did here? Some of us may not have really used callbacks very often. You know, they're kind of something that we touched on a little bit in class, and we didn't really spend a lot of time on. We kind of went straight to promises. So I think callbacks are kind of sometimes the hardest thing to like wrap your brain around, is, you know, the order in which things happen and enforcing that order. Because as we're going to see here in a minute, it can get kind of complicated kind of quickly. So for just two functions, right, it's not bad. We run the first one, we call the second one, it all just, you know, goes in the right order, right? So for two things, no big deal. Do you need underscores for callbacks? No. So this is just, this parameter is just named the way it is, so it's very clear what's happening. But yeah, we could call it anything. We could call it unicorn. and the same thing would happen, right? It's just a parameter. So that's a good thing to touch on. Parameters, when you're declaring a function, parameters are just a name, right? You could call them A and B, or remember when we do full stack apps, right? Sometimes we say request and response, or sometimes we just say rec and res. And as long as we're consistent in the usage, it doesn't matter what we call it. Certain things generally just have those names, like certain parameters generally have like standard names, just so that everybody who reads the code knows what's happening. But really, you could call them whatever you want to call them. Yeah. That's always a good thing to kind of remind ourselves of. Is you want to choose appropriate names, but theoretically, they could be whatever you want. Yeah, go for, okay, you got to go for yeah, right? Because what happens is we're just passing in the function name, and then we're only going to execute it once we're ready to do so, right? Because the thing about functions is as soon as you put the parentheses after them, it's going to run. Boom. So we don't want to run it, we want to run it when we want to run it, right? Exactly. If we set, that's a great call out there, Rascal. So if we set the argument to this, and try to pass it into order, it would, the function would execute immediately, and the argument would become the return value of production, right? So it would execute in the wrong order. Production would run first, it would return a value, and then order would try to pass that value in as an argument. So we want to we're just passing the function itself, and then we only call it once we're good and ready. Does that make sense? Like I say, callbacks are kind of funky, and they can be hard to get your brain around, which is why I like this tutorial, because it takes it real slow. It doesn't try to shove it at you too fast. I did a review of of callbacks, async await promises a while ago, and the guide that I used, it went way too fast, and it tried to shove way too much at you, and I ended up like, it was just too much. And so that's why I like this tutorial, because it walks through it nice and slow and gives good examples. Yeah, Rascal says it was easy to skip callbacks, since for us in modern times, aside from set timeout, you'll mostly find it in older code that doesn't support promises. So we'll need to use callbacks, or if you want to wrap event-based results in a promise, this can be done via callbacks and such. Yeah, so there are some uses, but yeah, it's an older way of thinking about things. We have more modern ways of dealing with it now. But that's not to say that you wouldn't encounter it in production code, which tends to be sometimes very archaic in itself. Okay, so it says to take a break, but we're not going to take a break yet. We got 15 minutes, and we're going to cover some more stuff. So let's power through. Yeah, this is easy to digest, right? Safety vest. Yep. I like this tutorial. Welcome, Armure. Good to have you. All right. So let's go ahead and clear our console. And this time we're going to add a little bit to our order function. So we can pass, if we're doing a callback, we can pass in more than just the function name. We can pass in additional parameters as well. So I'm going to change this. So I'm going to change this back so that people don't get confused as far as what unicorn is. I'm just going to real quick change this back to the original parameter the original parameter that we were using. There we go. Okay. So we can also pass in additional things that are not functions, right? So we could pass in the fruit, a certain fruit name. So for example, if an order was placed for, a topping of, I don't know, what fruits do you put on ice cream? I can't even think. Berries, I guess. Berries is the only thing I could think of putting on ice cream. Mango, okay, that's a good one. Yeah. Oh, we got another stretch. Man, y'all are keeping me limber today. Ooh. Okay, all right. We got people who are, ice cream fruit connoisseurs apparently. Mongos. I caught that rascal. Homie coder. Yep. That's so yeah. I'm glad you're asking that question. Yeah. You removed unicorn and still received the same output. Well, yeah. So in this case, we kind of have our functions written in a certain order. But there are times when the things aren't going to run in the order that you expect. You might have things in different order on the page, but you still want them to happen in a particular order whenever they execute. There could be a lot of factors that cause things to execute in a different order than what you expect. And so if you want to force a certain order of operations, that's when you could use a callback to do so. But yeah, in this case, it doesn't really matter either way. Yeah. Okay. So we're passing in an additional parameter here. We're going to pass in a fruit name and still also call our production function as well. I guess they want us to get rid of the console log. That's fine. And they also want us to clear out the production function as well. And when we call order, right? When we call order, it is expecting, now it's expecting 2 arguments to be passed in. So the first one is going to be a string of some kind, apparently. And then the second one is going to be the function. So all we did there was we just kind of reset our functions, still containing the callback and adding an additional argument to be passed in to the order function. Okay, so reminding us of our steps for making our ice cream. First, place the order, cut the fruit, add the water, start the machine, container, toppings, and ice cream. So note this. This is kind of going back to the question of, well, I removed the callback and it still did the same thing. Why does it matter? Well, now we need to consider time. So each component of this process may take a different amount of time to execute. So in this chart, we can see that step 1, blah, 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 we already went over that. But each step takes a slightly different amount of time. So in order to kind of illustrate this, we're going to use the set timeout function to establish the amount of time that it takes for each step and kind of force the execution time to be a little bit longer for each step. So the set timeout syntax is essentially we call a function. So we say set timeout, we call a function, and then we can set the time it takes, or the time to wait, right? And that will force a longer amount of time before that whatever we're calling finishes. So let's select our fruit and use this function. So order, passing in fruit name, call production, and this time instead of just calling production right away, we're going to set a timeout so that the ordering process takes longer. So we're going to set timeout. Declare an anonymous function here and console log, and just say what fruit was selected. So whatever fruit name passes in, box. And here, this is good practice too. How do we go into an object, go into grab a certain key inside of that object and select a certain value from within an array inside the key inside the object, right? How do we drill down? How do we use object notation to drill down into an object? Yeah, so we can use dot notation. We can use bracket notation, right? There's a couple different ways we could do it. So in this case, what are we doing here? I'll type it out first and then we'll review what's happening. Fruit name, yeah. And let me just finish this. I have a hard enough time typing in general, can't talk and type, right? Okay, so what do we do here, right? Well, first we said, all right, go to stocks, which is our object name. Look for the fruits key. And essentially inside of that fruits key, look for the fruit name, right? We got a bot, I know. I think they're a bot. Hang on, I'll ban them, 2 seconds. My first bot. By the way, if you are a real person, I'm not interested, and please leave. Be faster than me banning you. Actually, I've ever had to ban somebody before. I feel kind of like... ban. Okay. There we go. They're gone. My first ban. There should be a Twitch achievement for that. That would probably lead to some bad stuff. Anyways. Okay. So we'll see what this returns once we run it. Oh. Panhammer. It was the Zuckenbots. Yeah. Okay. So console logging, that's what fruit name was selected. And after that, we're going to take our call production statement and we're going to move it inside of our timeout. And we're going to put a delay on that timeout of 2000 milliseconds. I believe that's milliseconds. Okay, and then our second function is just going to be blank for now. And we're going to trigger that order. So let's see what we're passing in. All right, we're passing in a 0 and we're passing in our function name. So why am I passing in a 0? Yeah, it's a number. Well, Vertizoid, yes, I don't disagree with you, but if you look at the tutorial we're following, we're just going with that. We're going to do what the tutorial says. But yes, we kind of talked about this on the last stream, right? There's always best practice ways to do things, but while we're learning, it's not wrong to just do what works, right? Yes, but I don't disagree. It's the fruit index, right? Yeah, we're building stuff. Exactly. Yep. Oh, got another stretch. Okay. Be a baddie, indeed. Throwing spaghetti at the wall and seeing what sticks, right? That's what we do. Okay, so but I don't disagree with you. You're not wrong. All right, so we're passing in a 0 to get the first item in our fruits array. It's going to console log that, and then it's going to call production. So let's run it, and we'll see what happens when we do. I'm going to save. Nothing's happening. Oh, there it goes. So the timeout ran it after 2 seconds, right? Because we enclosed this whole thing in a timeout. And we already figured out, right, that we passed in a 0 and it grabbed it out of our fruit object. Okay. It set the delay, and the important thing here to note is that remember how when we called, when we used the timeout at the very beginning, we had console logs, we gave the middle item a timeout, right? And when we did that, it caused items 1 and 3 to execute immediately. And then item 2 was delayed and only appeared after the other 2 were already done. Well, in the case of this particular, our ice cream shop here, right? We always want the order to occur before the production. And so when we did it the way we did it, we essentially still forced that order. Even if we had set this timeout without having the callback, production would have run first without the order running. Sorry, while the order was still waiting to complete, right? Minus 2.075 seconds. I was slow, computer. And so because we set the callback, right, we force the order of execution, which is important. That's what this is trying to illustrate here. All right, so let's do the same thing for production. We're going to add for production here, set timeout. And do a console log, production is started. I shouldn't have taken out the console log before. And adding a delay now of, I guess, 0 milliseconds. Okay, and I guess this is just to clearly illustrate what's happening. So let's do it again. Still, it took 2 seconds before it displayed the results for both executions, right? Even though this one was set to a delay of 0, it still said strawberries first, followed by production starting. And so I think that's pretty clear how the callback is helping enforce the order of operations, right? Yeah. Okay, so the next thing we're going to do is, excuse me, essentially modifying our functions to now call a third operation, right? Because we place an order, because there's 7 steps. We're trying to do 7 steps here, right? So an order gets placed, production starts, we chop stuff, we containers, I don't know. There's a lot of things. And so if we're using callbacks for all of this, we're going to have to really be careful about the order in which we're calling our callbacks. Okay, so we're gonna add another step here. We'll nest another set timeout function in our existing set timeout function to chop the fruit. I think y'all can probably see where this is going, huh? All right, but anyway, let's follow this to its logical conclusion. So production starts, and then we need another step. So inside of our first timeout, we're going to put another one. Console log. The fruit has been chopped, and so chopping the fruit takes 2 seconds, so we have another delay there. Okay. And so because we know that we want, the production has started statement should come first, followed by chopping the fruit, which takes 2 seconds. So let's save that and let's see what happens there. Yeah, so we saw what happened there, right? 2 seconds after the order was placed. Well, so the order was placed and production started, and both of those statements displayed at the same time, but the fruit gets chopped 2 seconds after production starts because we nested it inside of here. So this is already starting to get a little wonky and confusing, right? See a callback hell. Yeah, some of you already know where this is going. Yeah. Yep. Pyramid of doom, indeed. It's starting to happen. Place the order, we cut the fruit, all sorts of stuff we got to do. Okay, so to cut a long story short, I'm just going to copy and paste this here, and we're going to execute it and see what happens. But holy cannoli, this is a monster, right? We got to, in order for us to put everything in order the way it needs to be, we have to nest everything so carefully and give it the appropriate amount of delay before the next thing starts. And we can see that, you know, the timing here looks about right. But it's incredibly confusing to try to parse this out. Syntax error in my brain. I know, right? This is super confusing, and it is I mean, that's just the way it is, right? Like, callbacks by their nature are confusing. So there has to be a better way. All right, let's run it. Okay. Going. 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 And serve. So everything happened in the right order, but it was a bear to get there, right? We're nesting, we're nesting, we're nesting, and everything prints out. And the tutorial even says, feeling confused? Build that pyramid. Are the Egyptians going to pay for it? We've handled it and yeah, it's right, Rascal, exactly. And we haven't even done any error handling. So imagine if we were trying to do callbacks with appropriate error handling. That would just suck rocks, right? Yeah. Driftwood says, but back in my day. Yeah. It'll become technical debt for future you. Yeah. Future you isn't me yet, so why does it matter? This nesting is disgusting. Indeed it is. Yes. I hate reading this. Yeah, well, this is how people used to have to do things. I think Leon was even telling us. He was like, "Yeah, when I first started out, you know, this is what I had to do," and I'm glad that better options exist. The art is pretty great, isn't it? Yeah. So and even yeah. So this is callback hell, which some of you immediately flagged, right? And they even show you like it can even be abstract, presented by a very abstract drawing, and we all understand what it is, right? So, what is the solution? Well, promises to the rescue, right? So we can get out of this nastiness and start using promises instead to make our code much more easy to read and easy to write and easy to follow. Yeah. It'll be total chaos, exactly. So, but before we do that, we're going to take a break. 5 minutes. We're going to take a break. We like to be healthy. Go do what you got to do. I'm going to feed my dog. And then we're going to come back and we're going to get into the good stuff, right? The stuff we want to know about and we want to practice, which are promises and async await. Break time. Yep, the solution is to close my computer. Never a bad solution. The goldfish needs a walk. Indeed, yes. So 5 minutes, we're going to take a break, and I will see you all back here in 5. Oh, how are the kittens? Yes, the kittens are doing great. And they are so much better than they were. And I'm, you know, they're so much friendlier now. I can pet them, all that sort of thing. So, yeah. Google, I want the Google timer. Give me. What? Where's the Google timer? No. Wrong. What the heck? Where's the Google timer? The one I always use. What is happening? Am I in the Matrix? What is going on? Minute timer. I Googled what I always Google. Ugh. I don't like this. All right, fine. I'll use it, but reluctantly. Ew. Yeah, I don't know what's going on. But anyway, here you go. This is a timer. It's not the right one, but whatever. All right, I'll see you back in 5 minutes if you can even read this counterfeit timer. All right. See you soon. All right, folks, you still got a minute left, but since Chris is on today, I think I still owe somebody an additional kitten cam. So I just wanted to show you, for everybody who's asking about the kittens, I wanted to show you that they are doing great. And this is one of our named kittens that my wonderful Twitch chatters have named for me. This is Xenos the World Destroyer, or Little Crispy. Yep. Yeah, he's actually the reason that I have this litter. He is, he's a little sick, so we're working on it, trying to get some weight on him. He's a little too small, but yes, indeed. Yeah, but he's super sweet, super cute. He's meows like a chain smoker. It's great. He's got the most raspy meow in the world. Yeah, and I love him. He's such a sweetie. So, yeah, good little baby. All right, I'm going to go ahead and pause the timer and put this little dude back. I just wanted him I just wanted to show him to you all, and yeah, let you get it. So this is what this is the kind of cuteness that you can name by saving up your channel points and spending them on the Name a Kitten reward. So instead of making me hydrate 60 million times, you could be naming a kitten. So that's my shameless plug for my channel point rewards. All right, I'm gonna put him back 2 seconds, and then I will be back online. Rascal, dang it! All right, hang on. All right, and we're back. I hope you enjoyed that impromptu kitten cam there. Brings you us back. Yeah, as much as I would love to have him with me for the entire stream, I don't think he would enjoy that too much. So, justice for Little Crispy, indeed. You don't have to proceed to show kittens on stream. Yeah. Google got mad at me for using set timeout, I guess. Yeah, it saw me trying to use callbacks, and it was like, fine, we're not going to let her have the timer anymore. Ugh. All right. Welcome back, folks. Let's now finally get to the good stuff and start practicing some promises. There was actually a built-in break here, I guess. So good timing for us. So compared to the format for callbacks, we can tell, that the format for promises is going to be much easier to follow, right? So we have the promise, and then we have, each of the steps in sequence afterward, compared to the syntax for callbacks, which is just hot garbage indeed. Oh, that's my dog. My dog is still in the room, but the balance on my lighting is super messed up today. Hang on, let me just turn it down a little bit. There we go. That's a little better. Okay. So promise has a much easier to read format, as we already know, right? So let's dissect a promise. What does a promise consist of? So a promise is made, it's pending, and it's either, so a promise has two results, right? It's either resolved or it's rejected. And we haven't done too much with, rejecting promises. I mean, as far as thinking about rejecting as an action, but we are familiar with what happens when we catch a promise, right? Or when we catch something. We catch errors all the time when we're doing promises. So if it's resolved, then we can potentially, if we want to, we can perform additional actions. We can do multiple thens. When we do a fetch, right? We have a promise, something gets fetched, the promise is resolved, and then we can perform additional actions using then, but only after the initial result is fetched, right? But the alternative to that is we try a fetch, the URL is invalid for example, and we catch the error. Now, there's an option that I don't think a lot of us have probably used all that much, and that's finally. So we can have something that happens no matter whether or not the action succeeds. So, I mean, I feel like this is something that is potentially sometimes useful, but I just never think to use it, right? But yeah, finally can happen whether or not the promise is successful, only just when the promise completes. So as the chart shows, the promise has 3 states. It's pending. This is the initial stage. Nothing happens here. The customer is preparing to give you the order, but they haven't ordered anything yet. So the cashier is just waiting. The customer is like, looking at the menu, hemming and hawing, and the cashier is waiting for them to say something. When the promise is resolved, the customer's ordered, the food has been made, and the customer has their food and they're happy. When it's rejected, the customer didn't receive the order and they left the restaurant. So we can start replacing all these callbacks with promises here in our code. However, before we do that, we need to understand a few more things about promises. Rascal the honorary mod. Yes, Rascal is very helpful in chat, always has been. Yeah, and so yes, exactly. That's a really good point there, Rascal. So instead of resolved, we might see promises as being fulfilled as well. Yep. Good point. All right, so let's look at a few more things before we start just diving into the code. So we want to understand the relationship between time and work, chaining promises, error handling, and finally, what finally does for us. So relationship between time and work. So we have our steps and the time it takes to do each step, right? We looked at that before. So I'm actually going to decide if I should open a new window or, well, I'm going to leave my variables in place, but I'm going to clear out the functions. Boop, there we go. So I'm going to leave my my stock object in place, but clear out everything else. We'll see if I regret that later. I don't know. Just yeet that code, right? Yeah, let's yeet it. All right, so we're going to create a variable. A Boolean, right? Boolean, true or false. Shop is open, true. Cool. Shop is open. Now we're going to create a new function called order. And we're going to pass in two parameters, time and work. And again, we're going to practice our arrow functions here. And now we're going to make a promise to the customer, because in order for our store to be successful, we're going to need to serve some ice cream, right? So our promise to the customer is that we are going to return, essentially, we're going to have a return to the customer, and that promise is that we will give you ice cream. The precious pyramid, it's gone, I know. Oh, thank you for sharing that, Mavi. Thank you for sharing your cheat sheet for promises. Yeah. Return. And our syntax for this is we're going to return a new promise. And we're going to have two results for this promise, I guess. It'll either be resolve or reject. Either successful or it's not. Those are the two possible states for our promise. So in this case, a resolved promise means that our ice cream is delivered. And then if it's rejected, our customer didn't get our ice cream, right? So a couple things to check here. In order for us to give our customer some ice cream, the shop has to be open, right? If they show up at midnight, we're not going to be able to give them any ice cream. So we need to take our is shop open variable into consideration. And so if is shop open, then we can resolve our promise. Right? If it's not, I'm not going to hit enter there. Else, we can return. We're still closing the promise, we're just closing it with a rejection. So the promise is resolved. It's completed. The promise is complete, but it's just in a rejected state. So we can console log that the shop is closed. Now, how does this if statement work? Right here. This is a good little this is a good review of JavaScript fundamentals as well, which is, you know, we've gotten pretty abstract in the way that we're using Express and Node. So let's remind ourselves about the basics here. Why does this if statement work? Yeah, right. It's truthy, right? The variable is set to true. And so we're essentially just saying, hey, if an if statement by default is it's looking for a true result, and so we're passing in a variable that's literally a Boolean value of true, and so this if statement is going to say, yep, this condition right here, this condition is true because the variable itself is a Boolean, which is set to true. So we will go into this if condition if the shop is open. Yeah. Exactly. We don't need to be explicit about it. We could if we wanted to. We could say if shop open, you know, equals true, but we don't need to because the variable itself is a Boolean which is set to true. Yeah, exactly. All right. So this is the basic function for our promise. And we're also going to add a set timeout inside of our if statement, just to sort of better illustrate like the nature of work being done in our specific example that we have here. So ice cream, you know, takes a little while to make, and so this promise therefore should, if the shop is open, the promise should take a little while to resolve because it takes a while to make the ice cream. All right. So, but they do have a note, in real life you can avoid the time factor. This is completely dependent on the nature of your work. Exactly. All right. So we have our promise. We're checking to see if the shop is open. And if the shop is open, we're going to set a brief timeout. Oops, not interval, timeout. And after a certain period of time, we are going to resolve the promise. So set timeout, and work is getting done. Well, after a certain point, we'll resolve the work and close the timeout with a certain period of time. Okay. Does let mean that it can be any object? Well, so this is kind of just standard like arrow function syntax. If that's what you're asking. This is just basically how you can set how you can declare an arrow function. I mean, it is a variable, and we are, so essentially what we're doing is we're declaring a variable, but instead of like a static value, we're assigning that variable to a function itself. Yeah. All right, so we've set up the basic configuration for our promise here, right? We're checking to see if the shop is open. And after a certain period of time, based on a time value we're going to be passing in, our whatever operation we're performing will take a certain amount of time to work. And then at the end of that time period, the promise will be resolved with some work occurring. All right, so let's start some production. Well, then it won't wait. It won't wait for the period of time. It'll just run. If the resolve is placed in the if statement itself, it'll just run right away. Yeah, it'll resolve before the timeout. Exactly. Yeah. Yep. Okay, so order, we're going to call our order function. And we're going to pass in a time of 2 seconds. And we're also going to pass in an anonymous function here that will just console log, right? So essentially what's going to happen here is that it's going to check to see if the shop is open, wait 2 seconds, and then complete the work that needed to be done. All right, let's run it. I'm going to clear the console. There we go. It waited 2 seconds and then the work was done, right? Yeah. And with this being done, the promise was resolved successfully. Now, if we can set our shop closed variable to false, and let's see what happens instead. Now we should see that this promise is rejected immediately. There's no wait. There'll be no waiting, right? Because if a customer walks up to the door and they see a closed sign on the door, then they're going to turn around and walk away, right? They're not going to sit there and wait for something to happen. Just says nope, indeed. Yeah, so let's run that. Yep, our shop is closed. Exactly. And our promise was rejected. Yeah, and we can see it's very unhandled rejection. Ah, it doesn't like it. Yep, but we did reject it. Okay, so with that in mind, that's a very basic promise, right? But in general, the way we don't use promises in this way, generally. I mean, well, I'm not going to say that for sure, but like generally what we do is we use promises because we have certain things that need to happen in a certain order for them to be successful, right? Thinking particularly of fetches. Generally, we use the fetch, we start our promise, and we get something back from the fetch, but we still got to do a bunch more stuff to it, right? It's not ready to go just after that one thing happens. What we want is to then perform a series of actions in a certain order against the results of that fetch. And so in order to do that, we can use chaining. So yeah, exactly. So with promises, it acts almost like a promise in real life, right? As a person, you promise something, either you keep the promise and return something, or you don't and you reject. Yeah. Either way, the promise is complete, right? It's either broken and it's done, or you've given what was promised and it's done as well. So either way, the promise is completed, whether it succeeded or not. Yeah. So, but with chaining, we can add additional actions in the sequence. When the first task is complete, then we can use the then handler to add additional tasks. It looks something like this. We have a promise, a then, and another then. So some examples. You're giving instructions to someone. You tell someone to first do this, then do that, then the other thing, then, and so on. The first task is our original promise, and the rest of the tasks return our promise once one small bit of work is completed. So the promise keeps going. It's just passed from task to task, right? So we're going to put this into our project. So chaining is like a promise with a list of things to do. Yeah. Yeah, and the completed, no longer pending state is also referred to as settled. Yeah, the matter is settled. It's done, right? Exactly. Yep. Okay, so I'm going to change my variable back to true here before I forget. There we go. Clear the console. Okay. So we start our order. And after our order is started, we can actually, since what's being returned, look at what's being returned. what's being returned is a promise. So the promise is started, right? And we can chain additional actions to that promise and essentially keep it going, pass it down the line. So what's happening here then? Well, essentially what we're doing is we place an order. It displays that fruits are selected. A promise is returned, right? We can chain another then, keep the promise going, call order again, and return an additional promise. We're chaining promises and returning additional promises as we go. Right? So let's see what happens. Yeah, the promise gets passed down the line and continues to execute in the appropriate order. And so with that in mind, we can continue chaining thens in order to make sure that all of our actions execute in the right order. Now, why are we worried about this? Well, as a reminder, each of the actions that we're trying to execute takes a different amount of time. And so if we didn't have these chained in the way that we're doing, the way that we're going to do, then since we have timeouts on each of these actions are going to, take a certain amount of time, they could all just happen asynchronously and all show up in a random order, right? And they could get all jumbled together. But since we're chaining them, we are forcing an order of operations. So I'm going to copy and paste this. I don't want to type the whole thing, but should look a little better in my here. It should be a little easier to read, hopefully. So we can see that the first step takes 2 seconds. The next step happens immediately, then 2 seconds, then 1 second, 1 second, 2 seconds. You get the idea, right? All of these asynchronous actions could potentially happen in the wrong order if we didn't force them to be in an ordered manner. Project Dev, yeah, my videos are only on Twitch for 60 days. After 60 days, they automatically get deleted. It's a Twitch thing. So I do move them to YouTube, which Rascal just linked to there. You should be able to find it on YouTube, and I know it's still there because somebody just mentioned that they did it like just a couple days ago. So they mentioned on Discord that it just did it a couple days ago, so you should be able to find it. No, that's totally fine. No worries. Yeah, feel free to ask questions whenever y'all have them or have, just random crap you want to say. That's fine. No spam though. All right. So even though each of these actions takes a different amount of time, we can chain them together and force them to happen in the order that they need to occur in, right? And we do that all the time for fetches. We've seen that a bunch of times. Certain fetch actions may take longer than others. Like if we fetch, right, we need the information to come back first. And then we may be doing, crazy array loops or whatever against the information that comes back, which may take a long time. And then the next step might just be a console log or something like that. But we don't want the console log to happen before the loop is done looping and gathering all the information that it needs. So we're using these thens to just force an order of operations. So we'll run it. We'll see what happens. And we can see that there is a delay, and some of the delays are longer than others, but everything is still happening in the correct order. And this is much cleaner and easier to follow than all those callbacks that we were looking at before, right? Yeah. Yeah, so with that then chain, we're forcing a we're forcing things to happen in a synchronous order, right? Yeah. Because if we go back up to the beginning, sorry for the fast scroll, we're forcing a synchronous order of operations for these things that would otherwise, because of the timeout, the timeout starts and then it's going to finish whenever it's done. Right? But with the then, we're saying, nope, thing one, or sorry, well, I guess the green thing has to happen, followed by the blue thing, followed by the red thing. Yeah. Yeah, the Wordle was a while ago, wasn't it? Again, sorry for the fast scroll. Yeah, that feels like forever ago. That was back when I was still sitting at my dining room table with one little, like with my little laptop screen. Yeah. Okay. So we have our order of operations now, but what happens if something goes wrong, right? Because you saw what happened when I originally, changed this variable to false. In my, when I changed my shop open variable to false, I got a nasty error in the console, right? It was like, promise rejected, and it was freaking out. And it didn't know what to do. So we can handle errors in a better way. To catch our errors, we can change our variable to false, and this will deliberately trigger an error. And when we do that, if we recall, it gave us some really gnarly results. It literally says unhandled rejection. We are not handling, we're rejecting, but we're not handling the error properly, right? So in order to handle it properly, we can use catch. Just like then, it's the counterpart to then, except if a promise goes badly. Just like then, it also returns a promise, but only when our original promise is rejected. So then works when a promise is resolved. Catch works when a promise is rejected. So down at the very bottom, the nice thing about catch is that it catches everything, right? We don't have to put a catch after every single then. What the catch will do is essentially, I believe from what I've read before, is that essentially it will catch everything promise related that's in sequence above it, right? So you could have multiple catches if you have multiple promises, but it'll just catch everything above it in one bucket. Like a safety net. Exactly, Driftwood. Yeah. Oh, and Driftwood, thank you for the sub with Prime as well. Much appreciated. Yeah, I'm sorry I didn't see that. But yes, thank you for the sub. Much appreciated. Hey, Water Serpent, welcome in. We are just reviewing the basics of promises in JavaScript and async await as well. So you are welcome to join us. Catch me, I'm falling. Yeah. Right. So yeah, catch is I like that analogy. Catch is a great safety net. It just catches everything above it, right? Yeah. So we're going to catch, and it will grab everything above it. And we've seen that before with fetches, right? You generally have a few thens, and then at the very bottom you have a single catch, and it grabs everything. So we're going to handle it and say, if the store is closed, our promise is rejected, and the customer has left. Yeah. Now this should look much cleaner than all that nastiness of unhandled rejection that we were getting before. If you don't handle rejection well, try a catch statement. All right. There we go. Much better, right? It's no longer unhandled. We are now handling it with a catch, grabbing that and basically telling our code what to do when that happens. All right. Gotta hydrate. So, a couple things to note. The first message, our shop is closed, this is coming from the initial rejection. And after it's rejected, it goes into, it branches. So it's either, resolved or rejected. And we're in the rejected branch now. And so it goes down that branch until it gets to the bottom and it hits the catch, because there's nothing else for it to do. It's been rejected. It's not going to do any of the thens. It's going to skip those, go down the rejected branch, and hit the catch. Okay. The last thing is something, we should be a little bit familiar with thens and promises, but something that I know that I haven't necessarily made good use of in the past is finally. And like we mentioned before, finally occurs regardless of whether the promise was resolved or rejected. Jason says, now what the hell is finally? Well, we're going to learn about it. Yeah, we haven't really seen it very much, have we? So there's something called the finally handler, which works regardless of whether our promise was resolved or rejected. So whether we serve no customers or 100 customers, our shop will close at the end of the day. It's just something that's going to happen regardless. Whether anybody comes in or whether nobody comes in, whether we serve any ice cream or not, at the end of the day, the shop starts open and ends up closed, right? Yeah. So we can do that by saying finally. Console log end of day. Okay. So first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to set my open variable to true. So let shop open equals true, and I'll go ahead and run that. We'll watch that go. So the steps happen in the proper order. And at the end, we see that the end of day statement occurs. Now, if I set my shop open variable to false and we run it, we're going to go down the other path. Our shop is closed, the customer has left, but we still get the end of day statement at the end. So this might be useful if, in your promise, you still need something to happen. Like maybe like like in a more real world scenario, if you're doing like a fetch or something, maybe you still want to redirect the user to a certain page after the fetch is complete, regardless of whether or not it was successful. In your app, maybe you want like they click a button and you try to fetch some information and see if it's available. But even if it's not available, you still want them to land on the page that they're trying to navigate to. You might just have like a different message displayed on that page. Yeah, so Rascal has a good point there. Finally is a newer feature, and so it's just not very common because it wasn't implemented at the same time as other promise features. Yeah, that's a great point. Yeah, it's the reviews first Uno card to the while do loop. Yeah. Yeah, the promise will always end with finally if you have finally set. I can see that actually being very useful depending on what you're trying to do. So you have a certain action that you trigger, and then finally make sure that something happens at the end, regardless of whether the promise was successful. So I actually kind of like that. I'm gonna use it for my tech interview. They'll be impressed. Yeah, absolutely, do it. Throw some knowledge out there. Okay. So those are all the components of a traditional promise structure, right? Do we have any questions in there before we move to async await? So many JavaScript features every few years. Yeah, exactly, safety vet. There are so many features, and I think about that. I think about that a lot actually. So so many people come in and kind of try to gatekeep about like oh, you're doing it wrong, or oh, you shouldn't use this, or oh, you shouldn't use that. But JavaScript is coming out with new features literally all the time. Every tutorial is out of date by the time it's like 6 months old, right? And so if anybody says you can't do something or you shouldn't do something, I always just think like, well, JavaScript is going to come out with a feature to do it anyway in 2 months, and so does it really matter all that much? It's so fluid. It's such a fluid language, and so you got to be flexible, right? Versus PL SQL, which I use for my day job, it's extremely static. I mean, obviously, yes, SQL has had new features implemented, but just the contrast is amazing between the two. Yeah, dev drive, that's a good point. So you also, for each then, inside of each then statement here, remember that what we're explicitly doing here is we're passing the promise along, right? We're passing the promise along. And so in the end, so through each step, you always want to return something for the next then to make use of, because you're continuing the promise, you're passing it along. And so and then in the very last then, obviously you're going to want to have some kind of a result. And so we're passing the promise along, we're returning each time to give the next then statement something to do, something to use, and then in the end we return a result. So yeah, for the sequence to continue correctly, exactly, dev drive. Yep, I'm with you. So we need, the sequence needs to continue. We're playing it's like hacky sack, right? You know, hacky sack, the game with the little ball with the beanbags in it. In order for the game to continue, the ball has to stay in the air and it has to be kicked to the next person. So no problem. Yeah. So the ball has to stay in the air, or even like, you know, that little game you play with your siblings when you blow up a balloon and you punt it in the air. Like, it has to stay floating. So you have to hit it to the next person for the game to continue. Yeah, I was never any good at hacky sack, but thank you, Madeline. Back in my day, yeah, it's a hot potato. With the promise, if you're chaining multiple thens, it's a hot potato. You got to keep it going, right? You got to give the next then something to work with. You got to kick the hacky sack down the line. Those things hurt. Okay, so with that in mind, and I would highly suggest too, if you're struggling with promises and you know how they work, I really like the visual that was up a little. I really like this visual right here, showing the different ways that promises can be completed. And you know, it's not necessarily that a promise has to be successful in order for it to complete, right? It can be successful if it's rejected and then caught, and I mean that's valid, right? It's done. It's, you know, like Dev Driftwood was saying earlier, in a real promise, when you're talking about promises like with humans, a promise that somebody breaks is still a completed promise, right? It's just not completed in the way that we would like. So yeah. Oh, Madeline, thank you so much for the sub. Holy cannoli. Y'all are wild this evening. I love it. Thank you. Yeah, and we can see this again. J3. So let's look at it one more time. Right, so right now, this variable here is telling us whether or not our ice cream shop is open. And so right now we have it set to false. And so, whoops, sorry. And the first thing our promise here does, is it checks to see, is the shop open? And if the shop is open, then it will do some work. If it's not, the promise will be rejected, right? And so we're going to go down this right path right here in our infographic here. We're going to go down the right path. The promise will be rejected. None of these then statements will happen because we're not in that path. We're not in that stream. And the rejection will be caught. Something will, you know, it'll be handled in some way. And then the shop will close at the end of the day. Or sorry, the day will end. Sorry, yes, the day will end. So the sun's going to go down regardless of whether we open our ice cream shop, right? Yeah. Exactly. So if a promise is resolved, then has an error, it could be caught. Yeah. So when I run that, it skips all of these thens, right? Because we're not in that stream of the promise. So it's going to skip all this stuff and go straight down to the catch and the finally. So we did do that down here. This is when the variable is set. So this is the result when the variable is set to true. We go down the left path, we resolve it, and we handle, and then we can also perform any additional actions. But if it's rejected, we catch it, and either way, regardless of whether it's successful or not, the sun's still going to go down at the end of the day. Welcome, Hornala. Could you use an if-else statement for true or false? I'm not sure I'm fully understanding your question. So we are using an if-else statement for our true or false up here, right? We have a variable, we're setting it to false. And inside of our promise, we are checking to see what the current state of that variable is, true or false, right? Does that make sense? Let me know if I'm not understanding your question, because yeah, we are using if else, and so if is shop open is true, we go into this part of the if statement. If it is not, then we go into the else. Oh, no, it's okay. Yeah. No, you had the right idea. Yep. Exactly. You got it. You're on it. Okay, cool. Good questions. So with that in mind, this is an easier way to write promises than callback hell that we were in before, right? Constant, like having endless nesting of tasks. And so it helps us put things in sequence on their own lines. And this would look even better if I had more screen real estate. But everything would kind of be on its own line without the wrapping. Actually, I could hide this sidebar as well. That looks even a little better. There we go. So yeah, I mean, this is pretty clean in itself, but there's an even newer way for us to write promises, and that's called Async Await. So this is supposed to be the better way to write promises. I balk at saying better. When you're talking about code, I would say there's lots of different ways to do things. There's newer and older ways to do things. And it's definitely, a newer way to do things that can sometimes be, I would say, maybe cleaner. Maybe a cleaner way to write promises. It helps us keep our code simple and clean, right? Yeah, exactly. We do what works for us. Sometimes promises may be easier for us to follow versus async await. Sometimes async await may be cleaner for us to follow. I like the description, Rascal. Async await is just promises stacked on top of each other in a trench coat. Yeah. So it's good to understand. Yeah, it's good to understand. Like with most things, it's good to understand the underlying states because you're still working with promises. It's just a coat of paint on top of promises, right? Yeah. Madeline, yeah, so we're just following this tutorial right here. All of the code is in it. Oh, yeah, and Rascal has shared that. So you can definitely just go down and copy the code in the tutorial. We haven't done anything extra here. Yep. Okay, so welcome to Async and Await. We're not going to take a break just yet. We got 5 more minutes. Then we'll take a break. But all right, promises versus async and await. What is the difference? So before async await, to make a promise, we would write this. We would have a function. We would say we want to return a new promise with the resolve and reject states. And then we would have some code, right? With async await, we add the async keyword to our function. So in front of our function, we declare that it's going to be asynchronous. And then we can write code inside of the function and use the await keyword to force the order of operations. Okay, so in order for us to learn this, we're going to have a few more keywords to learn. And let me just see here. What's the next? Okay, let's look at the difference between promises, resolving and rejecting, and try catch in the syntax, and then we'll take a break. Okay, cool. All right, so before we get too deep into this, we need to understand how to use try and catch, which I think we may have seen. You probably saw on my latest stream. We implemented try and catch for a few server side functions that we were putting together. You know, especially when you're thinking about, you know, getting data from like outside sources of any kind. Sometimes those outside sources might not be reliable. So whether you're using promises or async await, you need a way to, you know, if something goes wrong, you need a way to handle it, right? So we use the try keyword to run our code while we use catch to catch our errors. Straightforward, huh? So it's the same concept we saw when we looked at promises. All right, that's probably kind of hard to see. Whoops. Yeah. Let me make that a little bigger for you. There we go. All right, so in a promise, we would do something like returning a promise and essentially do a check, and we would either resolve or reject that promise, right? And if it worked properly, we could have multiple thens, a catch, and then potentially a finally statement if we wanted. However, things look a little bit different in async await. We set our magical async keyword, and we then can declare our function like normal. We don't need to say anything about a promise. The promise is going to be, you know, sort of implied by this async keyword right here. That clues our code in. Hey, hey, something about this is going to be, you know, we're going to have something happening here that's going to be a little different than a normal function, right? So we execute our code inside the try block. We wait for that code to complete. And we can catch any errors and then console log those errors. So try, catch, and then potentially even use a finally block to have something happen regardless of whether the code is successful. Where would our if else go? Well, it would go inside it. Well, it depends on what you're trying to look for in your if else. So I think in this case, you would put all your code inside of the try, and then you could force an error if you wanted to force the catch. So your code is going to go in the try. You could force an error to force the catch to trigger, and then the finally would execute regardless. Yeah, all our code is going in the try. Yeah, exactly. So if what you're thinking of is trying to force an error, you would put it inside the try, and then hit the catch with the error by triggering the error, and then finally would execute regardless. Yeah. For async await, the try is the then for promise. Well, not necessarily. The await is sort of the then. We'll see more examples of this. Don't worry. This is a very basic example. We'll see some examples of how we can use await to, again, force an order of operations. Yeah, it literally says, don't panic. We'll discuss await next. No worries, no worries. Good questions. Good questions. That's why I like this tutorial. It's like, you know, it's like I'm throwing stuff at you. Don't worry, don't panic. Nobody panic. Exactly. It's like, I don't know if anybody's ever read The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, but like the actual book, not the movie. But in the book, the book of Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy has "Don't Panic" written in large friendly letters on the cover. I always like it when tutorials do that. Tutorials are like, "Don't panic. It's okay." It's empathetic, yeah. Driftwood says, I had to learn then before I ever understood async await. Exactly. And I think that's why, in most cases, you know, you don't just learn async await out of the blue. You learn traditional promises first, and then you learn how to make them potentially cleaner with async await. Yeah. So we're going to take a break. And then when we get back, we're going to learn how to use await in a similar fashion to how we used then. So that's what we're going to do. Still miss my 5-minute Google timer that's apparently gone. I saw somebody posted an article about it, the fact that it's actually gone. I wasn't able to click on it, but I'm assuming that confirmed that for some reason it's friggin' gone. I don't know why. I'm very disappointed. Ugh. Someone entered null in their database. All right, we'll start the timer. I'll see you back here in 5. Who knows? There might be another kitten in it for you. Okay, folks, we got about 45 seconds left, so come on back when you're ready. Like how we're all discussing the the abandonment of various Google products. Yeah, I know. I love Google. Like a lot of the stuff they make is so convenient. I use Android on my phone, but oh boy, the masters of abandonware, aren't they? All right, pausing the timer. Google Glasses. Yeah, I know, right? So many good things that got dumped. Yeah, absolutely. Um, yeah, I was just thinking like, man, I use Google Photos like for everything. Like every single photo I've ever taken is on Google Photos. And what if they suddenly decide that Google Photos are, not going to exist anymore? It just seems like everything could just disappear. Never got fiber. I know. I lived in Louisville, Kentucky for a while, and it was, said that that was going to be the next place for Google Fiber. I even had a T-shirt, like a Google Fiber T-shirt. I was so excited, and then they just dropped it. They're like, nah. So now I do have fiber now where I currently live, through a community, like there's a community fiber sort of a company, but yeah, still no Google Fiber. I even use Google Fi for my phone service. So I have my phone service. I have a Pixel, and I use Google Fi for my phone service. I'm pretty sure that one day they're just gonna be like, nah, we're Fi's, Google Fi is done. No more cell service. You're screwed. But I'm gonna enjoy it while it lasts, I guess. Yeah. No, my Google and my phone bill is really low. It's, I'm on Wi-Fi most of the time, and so they charge you by data as you use it. So not like you don't have to pay for a set amount of data. They only charge you for what you use. So my phone bill is like $30 a month. Great. For data, like with data, watching YouTube videos and stuff. Yeah, North America gets screwed on internet prices. We get screwed on a lot of things. Capitalism. Yeah, I'm not gonna get into it, but yeah, I agree. They killed free unlimited cloud for newer Pixels. Yeah, I have to pay for cloud. Yeah, not a lot. I have to pay. It's like $2 a month, but still. I live in the cow pastures. No fiber for me. So my parents, who live literally in the middle of nowhere, they actually just got. So their driveway is a quarter mile long, and they got fiber routed all the way to their house somehow. Like, so this is the cool thing. A lot of these grassroots met like community fiber like co-ops are starting because of the lack of overall fiber infrastructure here in the U.S. And so this community fiber co-op started in their little tiny podunk town, and it routed fiber all the way up their driveway, and they have fiber now, and it's so cool. Yeah, it's incredible. It's these like I feel like internet is, it's such a vital thing, and that so these little grassroots organizations are starting and supplying fiber to places that would not otherwise be able to get it. Yeah. Hope Stack Overflow doesn't disappear. Right, or at least the people who contribute to Stack Overflow, right? They better not disappear either. I don't know who they are, but somebody contributes to Stack Overflow, and they're crazy people. So hopefully they don't disappear. All right. Water Serpent, are you asking what we're working on here? We're just doing some practice with promises and async await. With that being said, let's look at, yeah, we're just practicing. We're not really building much. We are going to get into modifying a full stack template after we're done with this tutorial. Ice cream, yeah. after we're finished with this tutorial, we're going to get into looking at an existing full stack template and modifying it to use Mongoose and some async await stuff. But right now, we're just kind of refreshing on what these things are. Yeah. All right, so let's look at the await keyword. So hopefully, there is a difference between promises and async await, right? But they both sort of accomplish the same goal, just maybe in slightly different ways. So the keyword await makes JavaScript wait until a promise settles and returns its result. Okay, so let's think about that in terms of our ice cream shop. We don't know what topping a customer might prefer, chocolate or peanuts. So we need to stop our machine and go and ask the customer what they want as a topping on their ice cream. So notice here that only our kitchen is stopped. Our staff outside of the kitchen will still do things like doing the dishes, cleaning the tables, taking orders, and so on. So that's the thing to consider, is that we are only stopping one specific action. Other actions that aren't in the sequence may continue, and we'll see an example of that here in a minute. So we can create a small promise to ask which topping to use, and this promise takes 3 seconds. So we're going to create a kitchen function. I think I can clear the board for this. We'll see. I can always go back and paste it again if I need to. All right, so we're going to have a function called toppings choice, and it's going to return a promise like we said earlier, it can take 3 seconds to resolve while we ask the customer what they want. Now we're going to create our kitchen function, which is going to be doing a lot of things, but only one of those things. So basically we have actions A, B, C, D, and E. However, in the middle there, we have to wait while we go and ask the customer what topping they would like. So we have certain actions. These 3 things get done. We go ask the customer what they want, and then after they tell us what they want, then we can do the rest of the things, and then we call the function. However, let's say that we have some other tasks that we can do that aren't reliant on anything to do with making ice cream. So doing the dishes, cleaning the tables, taking orders. Let's see what happens when we run this function and there's a 3-second wait in the middle while we go and ask the customer what they want. So let's save that and run it and see what happens. Look at this. So our function started to execute, right? Tasks A, B, and C were done. And then we have this await, where we have to go ask the customer what they want. In the meantime, these 3 other things were able to be completed fully. And after 3 seconds, then tasks E, D, and E were done. Now, why did that work? Well, because it was able to happen asynchronously, right? We are literally going outside of our kitchen to ask our customer, what is your topping choice? In the meantime, other things can still get done. Once we get their topping choice, we enter the kitchen and finish the job. Yeah. Which I think is pretty cool, right? We're able to do tasks A, B, and C. Tasks D and E are being forced to await us going to ask the customer what's happening or what they want. But the additional tasks are able to complete. And then once this await is done, we finish the remaining 2 tasks. I think that's wild. And we can also kind of combine our syntax a little bit and use then, catch, and finally if we would like, which are our core premise of promises, right? So we don't have to, if we like using then, if that makes it clearer for us when we're writing functions, we can use then, catch, and finally as well. Okay, so let's go back to the shop. And now we'll have 2 functions. One of them is our kitchen where we make our ice cream. And then the other one is the time each task will take. So I'm going to clear the board again. And we'll have our shop open variable again. And this time we're going to have a time function. So what this is going to do is it's going to return a promise, and it's going to check and see if the shop is open. And if it is open, essentially what it's going to do is it's going to start a timeout. So we're going to pass in a certain amount of milliseconds. We're going to see if the shop is open. If it is, we set a timeout, because if the shop's open, then we can handle whatever task we want to do. If it's not, then we reject the promise and immediately console log that the shop is closed. Next we're going to do is we're going to create a kitchen asynchronously. And we'll have a try and catch block. Okay, so inside of our kitchen, we're going to wait a certain amount of time for something to happen. Doesn't really matter what it is at this point, but we're just testing it. So we're going to call our time function and wait for that time function to be finished. And if something does go wrong, we want to catch whatever error we get, indicate that the customer left, and then at the end of the day, we can go ahead and end the day. Okay. So we're just going to make sure that this works. I think it will. You can see it waited 2 seconds. It wrote strawberry selected, and then it ended the day. Now, what would happen if I set my shop open variable to false? What do you think we would see in the console? Shop is closed, yeah. Is that all we would see? Would we just see shop is closed? Let's try it. Let's see what we get. Shop is closed, right? And we see shop is closed because that was in our if else. So that's what happened when the promise was rejected. The shop is closed. Okay. And we see that customer left because we tried to await the result of this promise, right? But the promise was rejected. So we go into the catch block and we print customer left, and then the error, which in this case is undefined, right? And exactly, that's what I was looking for. Exactly, we see day ended shop closed because regardless of the end result, the finally block will still run regardless, right? That's the purpose of finally. It's gonna run no matter what. Yeah, exactly, Adrian, yeah. So I think it's important to kind of think through this logic and see, okay, yeah, these things printed, but why? So let's look at that again. So is shop open? Whoops. Is shop open is false. We called the function. So we ran. So what did we do? We triggered our kitchen function. Okay. Kitchen starts to run. It's awaiting this other function time, and we passed in 2 seconds to that function. So we go into the time function, we passed in 2 seconds. This checks to see if the shop is open. The shop is not open. So what does it do? It goes into the else block. The promise is rejected, and that promise is returned back to our kitchen function, which, it was still awaiting the result, right? It's awaiting that. So it says, oh, okay, well, it was rejected. So I'm going to catch that. I'm going to console log customer left and the error if there is one, right? And then the finally block is going to run no matter the result. Yeah. Why did customer left undefined? Well, because we passed nothing to our error handler, right? It was looking for a specific error to catch. We didn't pass anything to it. It knows it needs to hit the catch block because the promise was rejected. It knows it needs to hit this block, but it didn't have anything to print there. It was undefined. Yep. Yeah. And that's essentially what it's saying here. So this is what it looks like when the shop is open. So when the shop is open, let's do that path as well. So when the shop is open, and this variable is set to true, then we still trigger the kitchen function. Kitchen starts to run. It is awaiting this function with an argument of 2 seconds. We pass that in. Then we go into our time function. It says, all right, is the shop open? Yes, it is. So it's going to set a 2-second timeout. And then it's going to return that promise back to the main function. And since that was successful, it's going to continue our try block here. It's going to execute that. It's going to skip the catch block and go straight to the finally block and end the day. So if we were to run it like this, we'll notice that there's that 2-second delay. Whoops. Hang on. Or we get an error. That too. I thought I ran it before. I must have accidentally rearranged something. Hang on. There we go. I think I just accidentally keep highlighting stuff while I'm clicking around. Yeah. So we saw it waited 2 seconds and then displayed the result. Okay. All right, we got a stretch here. Adrian says, I've learned Async Await already. Oh, thank you. I'm glad you're enjoying the explanation. Yeah, this stuff is hard. It's not easy, right? And that's why it's good to just review it every now and then. And I'm not saying that, like, you know, I'm a master at promises or anything like that. I'm just, you know, continuing to practice, continuing to look at these kind of tutorials and just try to keep working on getting a better grasp of this stuff. Okay. So let's look at our task again. So again, we have this order of tasks, each of them taking a certain amount of time to complete. So let's go ahead and open our shop. So the shop is open. Now we're going to add some additional tasks to our kitchen function. So let's take a look at this before we just drop it in. So we have our async function kitchen, and then we have our try block. And inside of the try block, we're going to control the amount of time that each task takes by calling the time function and passing in a value. And after that amount of time, we can console log the appropriate value to show that the step has been completed. And then at the end, so if there's any errors at any point, we can catch that error and console log that the customer has left. Okay, so let's paste this in, take another look at it. All right, so in each case, we are waiting for the task to complete prior to console logging that the task was completed, right? We need to wait for this to be done, and then we can await the next thing. So the question earlier was, well, you know, is the try block like a then? No, I mean, if you're trying to do a more appropriate comparison, I would say that the await. So we can await multiple things and force them into a certain sequence, right? So we're awaiting each task, and inside of this kitchen function, we do nothing else until this await task is done, either successfully or unsuccessfully, right? If it's unsuccessful, we go straight to the catch block. If it's successful, then we can go to the next thing. So let's do this and see how it looks. Yeah, very cool indeed. All right, you can see the pausing here. Each task is taking a slightly different amount of time, but again, we're preserving the order of operations. What's the little play button I'm pressing? So I've installed an extension onto my VS Code that allows me to have a console directly in VS Code without having to go into the browser. It's called Code Runner. Thank you, Rascal, for reminding me the name of that earlier. I can't ever remember for some reason, but yeah, you can just go to the extensions in VS Code, just click that there and just search for Code Runner and install it. I do believe you have to have Node installed on your machine in order for this to work. So if you don't have Node, if you're not really building web apps or anything like that, you might not have Node. So just know that is required for this to work. So we could add a finally to this. Yeah, we could add a finally to this. See, I'm probably gonna get this wrong. I don't use finally, so I need to finally. Oh yeah, there's no parameter there. Yeah, finally. Boop boop. There we go. And we can just say console log. End of day. There we go. And so if we did that, then end of day would print regardless of whether the variable is true or false. So again, variable is set to true right now, so it's going to do all the things in sequence, and then with the finally it would print the result there. If I set the variable to false, then we can see what happens otherwise. Boop. And you can see that executed immediately, right? There was no delay. It didn't try to do any of those steps. It just said, oh, that promise was rejected. I'm going straight to the catch block. But still, regardless of what happened, finally printed anyway. Thank you, come again. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Okay. So that's the general gist of this tutorial. Obviously, this is a very introductory look at the concepts of callbacks and promises and async await. But I do think it's a really good introduction. If you want a deeper dive into the logistics of this sort of thing, I would suggest maybe the javascript.info tutorial, which is what I actually tried to go through initially, and that turned out to be way too much for an initial introduction to callbacks, promises, async await. But I think once you understand the initial executions, that's a really good deeper dive into the logic of it. What's happening, why are these things happening in this particular order, the sort of the reasons behind it. So if you're one of those people that you like to know the reasons why this stuff works the way it does, I would say js.info is a good tutorial for that. Yeah. Okay, so the next thing we're going to do is we're going to move on to the template and sort of shift gears a little bit and go into full stack and add look at the full stack template, or kind of remind ourselves what it's doing. We'll add Mongoose and to replace MongoDB client, and we'll do a little bit of async await tweaking inside the template itself. So any questions before we move on? Yeah, so I think and I think too, a lot of the places, like I say, a lot of the places where you'll see async await and promises in practice are not necessarily anything to do with console logging things or anything like that. It's more about fetching information and then having additional actions that rely on that information to be fetched that have to happen in order, right? So thinking about like connecting to like MongoDB or something like that. In order to perform operations on the data that you're getting from Mongo, you need to have the data, right? So you need to force actions to happen in order, but you don't necessarily want, you waiting on the database connection to stop other things from happening outside of that connection, right? If you have other things that can happen that don't rely on the database connection, you can use asynchronous functions to kind of pull that, like if you know it's going to take 10 seconds to connect to your database, but you could still like, render a page or something like that, you're going to want to render the page separately and then, pull down the data once you have it. So that could be a good use for asynchronous functions, and then, but still, forcing an order of operations within that asynchronous function. Yeah. Minimum viable product. That's a great username. Thank you for the stretch. Man, y'all are getting me stretchy today. Oh boy. There we go. Ooh, my neck cracked. Ugh. Ooh. All right. So let's switch gears here a little bit. Give me just a second to get my windows arranged. So it will wait until the asynchronous function completes before continuing. So it depends on what you're asking. So the actions inside of the asynchronous function will await the previous step by using the await keyword, right? So if I'm saying I want to connect to the database, I want to make sure that I have my database connection established and I get that data before I try to do other stuff with it inside of my database connection, right? So I could, await the connection, await, putting the data in an array, and then do additional array methods using that await keyword and putting things in an appropriate order. However, I could still, outside of the function, since I've made my database connection asynchronous, I could have other things happening independently that complete, before my connection is done. And so you can kind of, you can remember the asynchronous keyword. Let's remember what asynchronous means. So asynchronous means that things can happen simultaneously without interfering with each other, right? And so if we make it a function asynchronous, we can kind of pull it out of the flow and really control what happens inside of that function in a particular order while still allowing things outside of the function to occur independently. So I'm not sure I answered your question, but in general, that's what's happening. It's inside of the function versus outside the function. Sounds efficient. Yeah, right? Because sometimes you have stuff like I said, sometimes you have stuff like a database connection. And if you're on a crappy internet, your connection might take 10 seconds. And 10 seconds is an eternity when you're thinking about code execution, right? 10 seconds is forever. And so you might want to pull that out of the flow and, have other things happen. But still control, the things that have to happen right after the database connection. Yeah, exactly. Deb Drive says it's like a position. So if you're thinking about it in terms of CSS, right, it's like position absolute. You're pulling it out of the flow and you're putting it wherever the heck you want. Exactly. Right. I like that. Yeah. Okay, let's go to the template and let me arrange my windows. So we're going to kind of also do like a full stack template, so sort of like a full stack MERN crash course. But first off, go if you want a direct link to the template. I should have had this pulled up. Let me get a link to the template itself. Oh yeah, of course, Rascal, quick on the ball there. Rascal's got it. So that's a link to the original full stack template. I'm going to start with a little bit of like a chopped down version because what I want to do is I want to run through like installing, the various dependencies that we need and stuff like that. So what I have right now is, well, I'll show you that in just a second, Goofer. So we can look at how do we install dependencies and that kind of thing. Oh, okay. I see what you're. Sorry, I misunderstood what you were asking there, Goofer. Yeah. So if they're already listed in the package.json file, it's just npm install, and that will just grab them all. Otherwise, it's npm install the specific package. So yeah, that's a great point there, Rascal. So what I've done here is just sort of made a shell. I have a server.js file with some stuff in it. I have a gitignore, where I'm going to be ignoring my node modules and my .env file. I have a .env file with a connection string in it and a port value. I have a views folder with an EJS file in it. And I have a public folder with a JavaScript file and a CSS file. Rascal is faster than my internet provider. Oh, nice. Yeah, so real quick, what I'm gonna start by we don't have to worry about what's in here just at the moment. I'm actually just gonna go to my index.js and let's go ahead and install some packages. So I think this is always good to practice, is installing things. So I'm gonna use git bash as my terminal here. Let's update this template. Yeah, all right. Got another stretch, man. I think I'm fully stretched, folks. I got no more stretchies. I'm all good, man. All right. I'm gonna be limber as heck. All right. So what's the first thing I need to do whenever I'm initializing a new full stack project? You're gonna get wrist stretches. That's what you're gonna get. npm init, exactly. And you would be amazed how many folks, and I mean, this isn't a bad thing. It's just something that happens. You'd be amazed how many messages I've got from folks, and they either forget this step, they either forget to do npm init, or they don't know what to do once they hit this, and they see all this stuff that pops up on the screen. Pinky stretches. Yeah, the first thing to do is obviously stretch. Yeah, exactly. There you go. Next stretch. There we go. So when this stuff pops up on the screen, all you got to do is you can fill these out if you wanted to, but you don't have to. This is just some labeling stuff, and just get down to the point where it says, is this okay? And click and hit enter. Now that'll bring you back to your prompt, and that will also activate your package.json file. Just bash enter until it goes away. Exactly. Yeah, or yes, dev drive, that's a good point. You can just npm init -y, which should skip that. Yeah. So in class we haven't learned that command, and so yeah, I think it's, but that's definitely valid. Yeah. I don't do Dr. Levi stretches on stream. No. Nothing official, no. Okay, so once we finish npm init, that's what sets up our package.json file where all of our packages are going to go, right? And so let's install some packages and watch them pop in here. So I'm going to install a few things. I'm going to install Express. Oops. I'm going to install Cores. I'm going to install, now this will be slightly different than what we've seen before. I'm going to install, instead of MongoDB, I'm going to install Mongoose. If you're not familiar, that's just another way of doing stuff with MongoDB, right? And I'm also going to install .env. And I'm trying to think if I'm missing anything. Hang on. Oh, I actually have an instructions file. I can double check here. Oh, yeah, EJS and NodeMon. So, but NodeMon will install slightly differently. So Express, .env cores, this still says MongoDB, but I'll change that. and EJS. Okay, perfect. Here's what I would suggest. I would suggest grabbing the server.js file for starters, and having a views folder with index.ejs in it. Yeah, so at the very least, you'll want the server.js file and then a views folder with index.ejs in it, at the very least, and then obviously like a .env file, right? So you can put your database string and your keep your secret stuff secret, right? Yeah. All right. So we'll install these things. Hey, DevDrive. Yeah, thanks for stopping in. Feel free to catch the VOD and get the rest of it later. Exactly. All right. So we've installed those. Now I'm going to install NodeMon as well. But I want to install that as a dev dependency. Well, Goofer, all you need to do is just go to your package.json file and just delete the line and save it. Yeah, or you could take it out of the you could do it the janky way like I just suggested, or you could do it the right way like Rassel suggested and actually uninstall it. I just took the line out, but yeah. But yeah, so since when we're installing NodeMon, we want to install NodeMon specifically as a dev dependency. So in order to do that, we can't just say npm install NodeMon. We need to say save dev, which will install it specifically as a dev dependency. So when I did that, I didn't scroll quite quickly enough, but we can see that we have our regular dependencies here in our package.json file, regular dependencies, and then we have NodeMon as a specific dev dependency. Now, if I want to be able to start NodeMon more easily, I can take my start script here and change node server.js to NodeMon. Oops, NodeMon server.js. So that way, when I say npm start, it will start NodeMon instead of node. That's up to you if you want to do that. You could list NodeMon as its own step in here, or you could just do it this way. Yeah. Okay, so we've got our packages installed. Now let's take a look at our server.js file. So if you're using the existing template, right now inside of server.js, we're requiring Express, we're requiring cores, and here we are requiring Mongo client. However, what we want to do is we want to replace Mongo client with Mongoose, which is a slightly more like full-featured way of interacting with the database and allows us to do some additional things. So instead of saying const Mongo client, I'm going to replace this with Mongoose. I'm just going to say const Mongoose require Mongoose. Boop, boop. There we go. Easy as that. We have our .env config, and we have our port, which we set as a variable here. The other thing I'm going to do here is I'm going to remove this top section where we have all this stuff about connecting using Mongo client. I'm going to rewrite this to connect to the database using Mongoose instead, which is not going to be very different. Oh, what's the command to install Mongoose again? Yeah, it's just npm install Mongoose. Yeah. It's not going to be, it's going to look slightly different, but not too different. It should be still recognizable. And also, let's take a look at how we're currently connecting using Mongo client. We're saying Mongo client.connect, and we can tell that what's happening here is it's returning a promise, right? Because we're able to use the then syntax, that the then keyword, which we just talked about. Mongo client.connect, then do these other things that are reliant on the data that we're getting back from the database, right? So this connection has to be established before we can do this other stuff. So we're going to replace this with Mongoose, but we're also going to maybe experiment with some ways of changing this syntax a little bit as well. So I'm going to get rid of this whole section about the connection, and we're going to redo it using Mongoose. And I'm also going to, I'm going to set it up as an asynchronous function instead. All right. So I'm going to create a new function called const. Oh, and actually, I'm sorry, before I do this, another thing I'm going to do is modify my connection string in my .env file. So I'm going to show you my .env file. It's got my connection string in it. And I'm going to show that to you on purpose. And I'm going to be changing my database password right after the stream. Cool? Cool. So I'm showing you the connection file on purpose. The password will be changed immediately after the stream. Please don't get in there and touch my stuff. Awesome. All right. So inside the .env file, I have my connection string for my MongoDB cluster, right? I'm going to add one thing to that connection string. So inside of our connection string, this is not something we've talked about in class, but I think it's really useful. Instead of setting it as a variable inside of our server.js file, we can actually hard code the specific database that we want to connect to inside of our connection string itself. So inside of my MongoDB instance, I have my list of databases here, and I have a database called test, and we're just going to work in that one for the purposes of this exercise. So inside of my connection string, after this URL here, and right after the slash, so between the slash and the question mark, I can put a database name, and Mongoose will drill straight down and connect straight to this database. So normally in the past when we've worked with MongoDB client, we've just connected to the cluster, and then we have to then like set the specific database value every time. But with this, we can pass in a specific database name, send it straight to Mongoose, and Mongoose will connect directly to the database. Because generally that's what we want to do, right? We have a cluster, we have one cluster with a bunch of databases in it, but there's only one we want to connect to. So I think this is a nice thing to do. Put the database name straight in there and save it. And also to, you know, if you're copying the connection string from scratch, be sure to drop in your password because it's not going to be in there automatically. Okay. And I'm also going to replace it with my current password as well. Today's password. I literally change it like every single day, sometimes more than once. So I'm going to save that. And I've got my database name in there now, so we can connect straight to it. Okay. So let's connect using Mongoose and asynchronous functions. So we're tying it all together here. We're gonna practice asynchronous functions and Mongoose at the same time. Go us. All right. So this should look slightly familiar. Const connect DB. Can I make Fortnite? First off, welcome, baby Rennie, but no, I can't. I can practice asynchronous functions though. All right. So we haven't. So that's okay, Driftwood. We haven't done anything with the specific collection yet. So let's remind ourselves of terminology, right? So I have a cluster which contains all of my databases. Inside of the cluster, I have multiple databases, right? And we are connecting to the test database. Now, inside of my test database, I have several clusters, right? I have 3 clusters. We haven't connected to any clusters yet. We're just establishing this connection to at this level, at the database level. Okay? Does that make sense? We're going to connect to the cluster in a little bit. Yeah, it's important to keep reminding ourselves of, you know, the terminology and the levels that we have to drill down here. So we're connecting at the database level, and when we build our schema in a little bit, we'll also connect to our cluster. Yeah. All right, so I'm declaring a new function to help set up my connection. And so so Driftwood, just put your database name between in your connection string between the slash and the question mark. That's where it goes, and that'll connect you straight to the database. Whichever database you connect to. Okay, so ConnectDB. I'm going to set up an asynchronous function, and just like the little ice cream functions we did in our tutorial, it's going to look just like that. And so so I have an asynchronous function here, and I'm going to be doing some, I'm going to be awaiting some stuff. I'm going to be awaiting a promise. What's the first thing that I should put inside of my asynchronous function? Don't answer too quickly. Think about when we built the functions for the ice cream shop. What were some of the components? What were some of the components that we needed, regardless of what we were trying to do? Yes, we are going to get to Mongoose Connect. Yeah, we're going to need a try block, aren't we? Yeah, try and catch. Exactly. Yep. We got to try and catch that database, indeed. Yeah, so we're going to have a try block, and we're going to have a catch block, and, we're going to have potentially some kind of error if something goes wrong, right? So at the basics, that's what we're going to have. A try block that's going to do something, and then a catch block, which is going to handle any errors that we might encounter. Okay, so now I'm essentially, I want to connect the database and not proceed with anything else in this function until that connection is established. So what do I need to say here? What keyword do I need to use? Await. Yeah, right. I'm going to be awaiting a connection. So and what I'm going to use here is just mongoose.connect. That's all I need to say. Very simple. So mongoose.connect, very similar to how we connect using MongoDB client, right? Nothing crazy here. Mongoose.connect, and I'm going to pass in my string from my .env file. So how do I tell my code to go out to the .env file and grab the variables specifically that's in that file? Otherwise, I mean, how will it know where to look, right? It might be looking for something somewhere in this file. It's not going to know that it's in the .env file. So how do I specify that? How do I specify, hey, code, go out and look in the .env file? Yeah, exactly. I need to say process.env, right? And then I specify my variable name, which is db string. Yours might be called something different. It's just whatever your connection string variable is called. Okay. So I connect, I pass in the DB string, and that's going to tell Mongoose exactly how to establish that connection, what database I'm connecting to, and pass through the credentials. Okay. And you can add, so now additional arguments we can pass are some additional like database parameters. I'm just going to pass one. I'm just going to say use new URL parser true. And don't ask me to explain exactly what that's doing. It just seems to be necessary. So there you go. I think that was the same thing for MongoDB. I think we also had to pass this. I think it was the same thing. All right, so we're awaiting that. And after that's done, then we can do other things, right? So after this is done, then I'm going to console log, because I don't want to necessarily say, we're connected when we're not, right? I do want to say that I do want to send the I do want to send myself a message to say like, yep, we're connected, but I only want that to happen once the connection is complete. Yeah, piece of shoot. So I don't know. There was an additional typography. There was an additional property that I believe wasn't needed. I left this one in here because I wasn't 100% sure. It doesn't hurt to keep it in, but yeah, it may no longer be necessary. Yeah. Okay, so I'm going to console once we're connected. I'm going to go ahead and console log and say connected to database, and I'm going to give the specific database name as a template literal. So this will help us confirm that we've connected to the right database. So I can say mongoose.connection.name. Now, if I just had this, if this console log had the ability to execute itself before the connection was established, then it wouldn't be able to grab our connection name, right? This wouldn't work. It would send back, probably an empty value. There would be nothing. It wouldn't be able to grab a connection name if the connection was not complete, right? So this is going to tell us also that our connection is truly established because it will be able to get the Mongoose connection name from our database. So if something does go wrong, we're going to want to catch that error and console log it. And we can just say failed to connect and pass the error as well. All right. Does that make sense what this is trying to do? Right? We're forcing the order of operations, right? We're saying, hey, connect to the database and don't do anything else until the connection is complete. And only splash this message up on the screen once our connection is complete, and if something goes wrong, catch that error and let us know that we failed to connect. Yeah. Yeah, it's been thrown. Yeah. So this way, we can use this template literal to kind of be like, are you really connected? Yeah, you're connected. So we'll see what we get back when we do that. So what I expect to see here is connected to database test. Yeah, so the original version, if you have the original version of the template, it has a promise version of this, right? The original template was using I think it was using then instead. This is just a slightly different way to look at it. Yep. And so the last thing we're going to go ahead and do is just call this. We're going to call the function so that it runs, because being an arrow function, we still got to call it. So yeah, the original was promisey. Yep. Which is why I decided to go ahead, and it wasn't wrong, the fact that the original was promisey. Then it was using then. There's nothing wrong with that at all. It could have been left that way. I just wanted to practice some async await. So I was like, I bet I can turn this into a async function. So that's what we did. Neither is wrong, neither is right. Just different ways of accomplishing the goal, right? All right. So there's our initial connection. And I think everything else should be okay. I'm actually going to change. Is async more prestigious than promise? Well, it's newer. I think it's important to not say like, better or worse or anything like that. I would say sometimes, await can be a little bit cleaner. But sometimes, having those then, thens one after another could be, a little bit easier to read. However, one thing to consider is it's the new way. And it is that the thens are also constructed a little bit differently. So it's the right tool. Whatever the right tool is for the job, right? Could be different strokes for different folks. But I figure the more we practice with both types, the better we'll learn when is the right thing to use one thing versus another. So yeah. All right, let's see if this will run. I'm just scrolling down here real quick to make sure that there's nothing that's going to trip us up. I'm going to change my port value just because I have the original running on port 8000 and I don't want a conflict. So I'm going to save this and I'm going to launch NodeMon here. See if it'll go. Oh, okay. Oh, address already in use. Oh, because it's going to, it's trying to go to my environment variable and get the server there. It says the server's already in use because I have the original, I have port in my .env, exactly. Yep. All right, there we go. That should work now. Okay, let's try again. Kill it. And try again. Okay, there we go. So, and let's take a look at what we got here in the console. So look at what was printed. Server is running on port and then connected to database test. However, this connection function right here is the first thing in my file. And my port, my app.listen is all the way down here, all the way at the very bottom. So what we can see there is that it waited for the connection to be successful before the print. And that took longer than just firing up a port, right? So we can tell that that worked as intended. It waited until the connection was successful before printing this. And that and establishing that connection took longer than initializing the port, which makes sense. Yeah, exactly. So so it does give you a little thing. If you hover over it, it says await has no effect on this type of expression. However, I went to the documentation because I thought this question might come up. And the Mongoose documentation specifically says that when you are establishing your initial connection, yeah, exactly. You need to use await with mongoose.connect. So VS Code doesn't like it, but this is the correct way to do it. Yeah. No, I know. And that's why I pulled this up, because I thought, you know, VS Code is being, it's not you at all. VS Code is being misleading here. And they're kind of, they're messing with you. VS Code is messing with you a little bit. You know, it's not always right. Sometimes it, you know, tries to auto-populate stuff or whatever. No, and you're totally fine. That's why I had this in my back pocket, because I thought, you know, somebody's going to see that and be like, wait, what? And yep. But like Rascal said, you know, Mongoose can either return nothing or a promise, and VS Code can't figure that out. So yeah. So in this case, though, the Mongoose documentation does say, you know, use await, do your connection, you know, use await within a try catch, and then handle the error that way. So that's all you got to do. All right, cool. I don't know why the Mongoose documentation is such small print. All right. So we've established our connection using async await. We've converted it from a traditional promise to async await and to Mongoose. Cool beans, go us. All right, and our connection was successful, and we saw that our asynchronous function executed the way we expected, right? And it worked. Let's rewind a little bit and think about that. It worked asynchronously, right? This connection fired first, right? It started before our app.listen. It fired first. However, it was waiting on the connection, and so it was working asynchronously while app.listen went and established the port, and then the code came back, saw this promise was resolved, and finished executing the console log. So I think that's important to remember, is that this async is allowing this to happen out of sequence, right? Well, Redev, we're going to see that in just a minute. We're going to see an additional benefit of Mongoose, because we're going to add an additional feature to our template overall. Yeah, we're going to add a whole additional feature that Mongoose allows us to do. So we'll get there in a minute. Okay, so we've established our connection. Yeah, exactly. Yep. Yeah. So we've established our connection and we have our middleware. We don't really need to change anything about this middleware, but let's just quickly review what it's doing. So we have our view engine, which is going to allow us to access our views folder and execute some EJS if we would like to. So EJS, if you're not familiar, EJS allows us to dynamically render HTML, based on what's being passed to it from our server.js file. And express static public allows us to drop stuff into our public folder here and look for like a JavaScript file and a CSS file inside of our public folder. URL encoded, it helps enforce that we're passing the correct files with the correct headers. I mean, I don't fully understand what that's doing, but it needs to be there. So JSON, express.json helps us parse JSON. And cores helps with cross-origin requests. That's not always needed, but it's not going to hurt to have it. Who's JSON? Hello, Jerry. So JSON is just a format. It's a format in which we can send information. And JSON looks very similar to a JavaScript object. We'll see it in just a minute. Yeah, Goofer, check your username and password. Yeah, and if you do update your database password, you're right there, Goofer. It takes like 2 minutes or so, or depending on a lot of factors, it can take a couple minutes to update. Yeah. All right. So that's our middleware. And we have our middleware prior to any of our express methods. Middleware needs to come first, so that's why that's there. Now the next thing that we have here is an existing app.get method with an asynchronous, nominally an asynchronous function, that what it's doing is rendering our index.ejs file and then handling any errors, right? Got a hydrant here. So we're handling any errors. Welcome, Naveen. So promise all is another way of handling promises. So if you have multiple promises that need to be fulfilled before something else can happen, I believe it waits on, I'm sure Rascal can correct me on this, but I believe it waits on all of those promises to complete. So if you're doing like 6 fetches, it would wait for every single fetch to complete before moving on to the next step. There's different ways you can handle promises, and promise all is one of them. Yeah. Yeah, and the promises would, the promises would all be running simultaneously, but all of them would need to be done before you could do the next thing. Yeah. I have used that once. I used that once for when I built Jeopardy. For one stream I built Jeopardy. So I had to do 6 fetches at once because I needed to fetch different categories and all of the clues in each Jeopardy category from an API. So before the board was allowed to render, right? Before I rendered the board, I wanted to have all the categories there. And so I had to do 6 fetches and then render the board. Yeah. Exactly, Naveen. I think you have the same use case that I did. Mass calling an API, and then you get your responses, and then you do something else. Yeah. And it does. Scania, yeah, it passes a massive an array, and I think you usually end up with like a nested array. Yeah. I would think that's the right way, Naveen. Yeah. especially if you need all of the promises to be done before the next thing happens. Because then what you end up with is just an array of the results of all those promises. Yeah, it depends on whether you want them to be separate, like, separate calls happening simultaneously to your API, or whether you need them to be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, like happen in sequence. Parallel or in sequence, I think, is the question, depending on what you want to happen. In my case, I was fine with them being parallel because I just needed the end result. I didn't care what order they happened in. So Goofer, what I did in my package.json was I changed my start script to be nodemon server.js. So that way I can just do npm start and it runs nodemon for me. So I did update my package.json to be start nodemon server.js. Yeah, well, Goofer, if you have it as dev, you would just add a dev script here in your scripts. So you still need to add it to script. You would just add a script named dev and say npm run dev. Okay? So have a dev script here, have it say nodemon server.js, and run npm run dev. Yeah. Okay. I don't think I made any changes. There we go. Okay. All right. So let's go back to our server.js file and take a look at this get function. So what this is doing right now is it's basically just saying, hey, render our index.ejs file, and if it can't render for some reason, then throw an error. However, I want to make this a little bit better. So what I want to do is I want to, so this isn't really how I would necessarily be rendering an EJS file in real life. For a real app, like we saw yesterday, or not yesterday, on my last stream for like our to-do app that we did, the first thing I had to do was go to the database and grab some data, pull the data down, and then pass that to my index.ejs file. So what I want to do actually is get data from database and wait until I have that data, and after data is found, then render EJS and pass the data so that it can render on the page. So that's what I actually want to do. I mean, since I have EJS, I'm obviously going to want to render some data, and so I need to pass that as an additional. So like my data is going to go inside of my render method as an additional value. So data is going to go here. So that's what I want to do in real life. And so what I'm going to need to do is take this and actually convert it to a real asynchronous function so that the data is gathered first, grab the data first, and only once I have the data, then render the page. So that's what we're going to do. But it is break time, so we're going to take a break, and when we come back, we're going to figure out how to do that. How do we query the database that we've connected to, get all the data, package it up, and send it to the EJS. Send it along with our render method so that it can render on our EJS page. So we're going to rework this a little bit and make it more like something you would actually do if you were trying to render EJS data on a page. Or sorry, database data on an EJS page. Okay. So break time, and we will come back in 5 minutes, okay? Okay. Restart and go. All right, I'll see you back here shortly. Okie doke, folks, come on back. Right. Go ahead and stop the timer. And we'll get back down to business. So, those are arranged here. There we go. All right. So we've said the things that we want to do with our get function here. We want to get the data from the database first. And after we find that data, then pass that data and render our EJS so that the data can be used. Okay, so let's see. How do we get the data from the database? Well, with Mongoose, we're going to do it in a slightly different way than we might have done with MongoDB client. So a cool thing about Mongoose is that we can make sure that the data that we're passing in is much more structured than how we might have done with MongoDB client. With MongoDB client, what we did was we mostly kind of built our database objects on the fly, right? Like we would kind of have to set that up and then build it in. And with Mongoose, what we can do is build something called a schema, which allows us to kind of have like a scaffold or a foundation that will help us build objects or build our database documents, our objects, automatically without having to build them ourselves manually in our server.js file. So what we can do is build a schema and then turn that into a model for our objects and just call that model as many times as we need it whenever we need it. So that's what we're going to do here in order to this will also help us query against a specific collection in our database. Yeah. SQL design versus no SQL design? Yeah, kind of. Is there anything like this? Anything like what? What are you wondering about? Like a SQL design versus like a tutorial, or what are you wondering? Oh, thanks, Jazzy Pants. Thank you. Yeah, definitely go catch the VOD. So what we're going to do is we're going to create a schema, which is going to, like I said, create kind of like a template that will not only allow us to add data to the database, to a specific collection in the database, and have that data be in a specific format every single time. It's going to also allow us to query on a specific collection just by referencing the model and quickly returning a result that way. More advantages of NoSQL? Well, I mean, it's two different approaches, right? There's a whole debate of like, when to use SQL versus when to use NoSQL. It just has, NoSQL, these NoSQL type databases work better with, JavaScript. You can use similar JavaScript formats and things that we already know versus having to learn a completely separate language such as SQL. What more schemas? But yeah, you can find plenty of articles online, talking about the pros and cons of each type for various types of storage. NoSQL can also be better about storing things like images and non-traditional types of data. Yeah, it's JavaScript friendly. Yep, it's just a little bit more modern in some ways. Whereas, relational databases are great for, like SQL type databases are great for very traditional structured data, right? But yeah, I mean, you could debate for hours about the different types of, use cases for NoSQL versus SQL and when is best and which is better. But I mean, really, there's just different use cases for both in different scenarios. Best tool for the job at the right time, right? Yeah. So I would just suggest Googling it. Yeah, it's a great topic, exactly. I would suggest Googling it and reading a variety of different takes. You got to ask that. Yeah. And that's why I think it's worth, you know, it's not something I can necessarily just summarize for you in 10 seconds or whatever. But I think it's worth, you know, pulling up 5 or 6 articles on it and getting various takes and then figuring out how to summarize those takes, you know, in your own words, I think. Okay, so let's go ahead and set up a schema. So what I'm going to do here is I'm just going to create a new folder called models. I'm going to create it at the root here. I'm going to create a new folder called models. So we could have multiple schemas if we wanted, but we're just going to create one. And inside of the models folder, I'm going to create a new file called schema.js. Okay, and inside of schema.js, this is where I can set up that scaffolding that's going to help us just generate objects on the fly. New documents for our database on the fly as we need them. So inside of our schema.js file, the first thing I need to do is require mongoose. Whoops, hang on, sorry, typed in the wrong place. All right, const mongoose, and I'm going to require mongoose. Okay, and I'm going to go ahead and create a new schema. I'm just going to call it test schema. You can name yours whatever you would like. Again, these types of names are, you know, just reflective of whatever you're trying to do. I'm trying to do a test, and so it's going to be called test schema. And I'm going to create a new schema, new mongoose schema. And inside of this is where I can put the structure for the objects that I want to build, or the documents that I want to build. Yeah, and Goofer, if you wanted to, you could use import instead of require. Yeah, absolutely. Oh, thanks, Driftwood. Like I always say, if I wasn't having fun, I wouldn't be doing this. I could stop, you know, I'm not getting paid or anything. I can stop at any time, but I'm still doing it because it's fun for me. So that's why I do this. Okay, so we're going to set up our new schema, and a schema is really, again, it's just a template. It's kind of like a template for building objects quickly. So building new database objects like these objects right here over on the right, which are probably behind my head, I apologize. But this will help us build new objects quickly, and then we can call on this template whenever we need it at any point in the project, because we're going to export it for use elsewhere. So we have our new schema. And I'm just going to be very generic here, but obviously you can configure your schema however you would like. I'm just being super generic because, again, this is still a template, right? We're not really trying to do anything here. We're just trying to build examples of what you could do in your app. So item 1, and I'm just going to give it a type of string. So we're just setting the type. We're setting the object type, but there's other things that you could do here. Like you could say, you can make it required. You could make it a required field. You could give it a length. You could also set fields that might occur automatically, such as a date field, like an insert date. So the schemas allow for the flexibility of configuring the type of data that you want to pass up to your database. You could, like I say, you could set lengths, you could auto-generate some values, you could set types of entry. Yeah, a lot of different stuff you could do. Type string. So I'm just going to do very simple, again, item 1 and 2, both of them strings. Super simple. Civic, no. What we have had tonight is some really great questions from a lot of different people. So we've been having lots of great questions, lots of great explanations from lots of participation in chat tonight. Yeah. Okay, so we have our 2 items in our, oh, Jazzy Pants. Oh my goodness. Thank you so much for the sub. Man, y'all been popping off tonight. Gosh, thank you so much. Thank you for the sub. And it's with Prime, so you're spending those Bezos bucks. I love it. Very good. All right, so this is a very simple schema, obviously, but these could be very complex and have lots of different configuration options and requirements, and really shape your data in exactly the way that you want before it gets up to your database. And so what this helps you do is make sure that your data is going to always be readable by when you want to pull it back down out of the database. This way you can tell that it's always going to be exactly what you want, right? It's going to be, you're going to always have the exact names that you want. It's going to have the right structure. It's going to have the right it's always going to be the right type, right length, whatever. So when you pull it down, it's going to be exactly what you want when you want it, right? TypeScript. My goodness, that is an excellent name. Wow. That's yeah. First time chat too. That's if you didn't know, yeah, TypeScript. They come swinging in here with a first time chat. Nice, way to go. All right, so we set up our schema, and the last thing we need to do just to make this complete is just go ahead and export it, so that we can use it. Whoops. Oh, come on. Got it. All right. Module.exports. And what this is going to allow us to do is to grab this model and use it anywhere else in our code that we want. So I'm going to say mongoose.model, and I'm going to give the model a name. In this case, I'm just going to call it test model. I am going to assign the schema that I just created. Oops. Test schema. I'm going to say, all right, I have a new model called test model. It's going to be based on my test schema that I just created, and it's going to be associated with the collection that I want to access in my database. So we talked earlier about how before when we in our connection string, we connected to a specific database. In my case, I connected to the database called test. However, I have multiple collections inside of this database, right? I have multiple collections inside of the database. I want to connect to a specific collection. I want to connect to test collection, right? So in order to do that, I can actually pass that in my model export of the schema. Now, every time I reference this model, it will know that I am working with the test collection. So we can target that specifically without having to define it every single time. Like I don't have to define it in Server.js. I can just put it right here and say like, yep, this model has this structure. It's associated with this collection, and every single time, that's what it's going to hit. All right. So with that done, now we can reference this model elsewhere in our code, and we're actually going to do that in our get method that we talked about earlier. So as a reminder, what we're going to do here is we're going to try to get data from the database and from that specific test collection, which currently just has a few small values in it. After the data is found, render our EJS and pass the data through to render on EJS. Yeah, exactly. Oh, hey Naveen Ben, I am a backend developer as well. I'm a SQL developer. So I understand your question versus of NoSQL versus SQL, right? That's the perpetual question. My day job, I'm a SQL developer, and so I work with relational databases all day. And now I'm trying to learn NoSQL databases at night, and so it's an interesting contrast, definitely. Yeah. So that's cool that you're a backend developer as well. Do you work with SQL, Naveen? And yeah, that's a good point there, piece of shoot as well. If you don't specify a collection in your schema, if you leave this third argument out here, it will just create a new collection for you with an S on the end of your model name. So if I didn't specify test collection as my destination, it would say test models and create a new collection in my test database. Yeah. Okay, so let's go ahead and build this out. Now that we have the schema built, let's go ahead and build out our function here. Oh, Sir Wesley, that's rad. So you work with both MySQL and MongoDB. Nice. Awesome. I love hearing about, the variety of experiences that folks have. Okay, so what we're going to do is, instead of just rendering this right away, the first thing we want to do is hit the database and do a find. So I'm going to declare a new variable here. I'm going to say I'm going to call it content. So the content is what I'm going to get back from the database. So I'm going to grab a bunch of content and I'm going to dump it into this variable. So I want to await test model dot find. And what this is going to do is it's going to hit, it's referencing the model that we just built. And so that model is going to say, hey, go look in the test collection and get everything out of it. So it's going to bring back everything in this collection, which right now is just two documents, right? But it's going to go and retrieve everything, assign it to this content variable, and then it's ready to pass it to our index.ejs. So first thing I'm going to do, though, before we do that, is I'm going to console log it so we can see what we get back. So console log, and I'm just going to try and see what happens if I just console log content. I originally have that dumped in an object, but just going to try that. Okay, so console log the content, and then we can pass that content into our EJS file as an object. So we're going to pass it as an object with a single key straight into our EJS file. Yeah, exactly, Driftwood. It's cluster. So the cluster contains all of these databases. The databases are these smaller, specific groupings in here, and then a database can contain multiple collections, and then each collection contain multiple documents. Excuse me. Sorry for the sneeze. But yeah, that's exactly right. Cluster F, indeed. All right, so let's see what happens when we try to run this. All right, now quick pop quiz. How would I trigger this app.get to run? How would what I essentially am trying to do here is see if my find is going to work. And I want to trigger the console log. So what would I do? How would I trigger this? Go to the browser, yeah. And it's because it's asking for the slash, right? But what do I actually need to do? So, I go to the browser, and then what do I do? Yeah, you could also use Postman as well. I'm just going to do it in the browser, but yes, Postman is definitely valued. Yeah, and localhost whatever port you chose, right? In my case, I actually am using port 8500. But yeah, go to the proper port. Yep. Localhost is going to be 8500. Oh, test model is not defined. Oh, hang on. Well, that shows that my catch worked, right? Oh, that shows that my catch worked. Yeah. So it hit the try, it couldn't render it, and it sent back the error message. So that's valid. All right, test model is not defined. Cool. Let's figure it out. Oh, and you know what I did? Okay. Anybody know what I did? I know what I did. I exported this, right? I exported the module correctly. Exported, no, that's not the typo. I exported the module correctly. What did I miss? Yeah, Goofer's got it. I didn't import it. I exported it, but I didn't import it. Yeah, I can't use it if it's not imported. So the last thing I need to do is right up here at the top. Yeah, exactly. I didn't require it over here in server.js. So I exported it so it's ready for use, but I didn't import it. So test model, and I'm going to require. I need to require the model itself. Models, and in there I have my schema file. So I need to tell it where to look to grab the test model. There we go. Okay. So now it knows what this is, and it can use it to execute the find. All right, now we'll refresh. Hey, there we go. So it did two things here. It went out, it did the find. It console logged the content, and the last thing it did was render my EJS file. So I actually don't have anything in here that's able to read the data that I sent it, but it was able to not only get the data, but then render the EJS. So that tells us that the promise worked out. There was no error. It was able to render in the end. You remember this page? Yeah. And so let's look at what I got back, right? So I ran the find, and it knew, because I had set a specific collection inside of my model, it knew exactly where to look. And so it went straight into this test collection, right? We were already in the test database. It went to the test collection, and it grabbed both objects that were already in there, and it put them in the console. So if I had some EJS that could deal with it, I could send it straight through into my EJS file and, you know, list it or do whatever. But yeah, so now that we have this model, you could include this in a put or a post or a put or whatever. But yeah, so this can be referenced at any point now. Well, so in Find with Mongoose, you can also add filters in here. So like you can add like additional things to, like, you don't have to always, when you use Find, you don't always have to bring back everything. That's just what I'm doing here. I don't know exactly how to use this yet, but yeah, in here you can specify additional stuff. But if you want everything, you just leave it empty. I'm not sure about that error, Driftwood. Header sent. I haven't seen that one before. Has anybody seen that? Oh, maybe it can be fine without. Well, let's try it. Yeah, so it still worked without the, oh, wait, I didn't save it. Hang on. Yeah, okay, so it still worked without the brackets as well. Do you have your await here? No, you're fine. Yeah, no, that's because I think when I originally like grabbed this find, I think there was the example that I used had something in there, and I just took out the thing without taking out the brackets. So yeah. Yeah, that headers thing is a little weird. Anybody seen something tried to modify a header after the render step? Interesting. Yeah, we really don't have anything after the render in here right now, but I mean that's a reasonable hypothesis there, Sirius. Yeah, you might check. That's a good point there, Rascal Driftwood. You might check and see, do you have an additional render somewhere? But yeah, so this is how we can kind of, you know, modify this to use a schema. And then again, the schemas are the model is meant to be reusable, so you can use it multiple times throughout your code without having to reset up your objects every single time. You had it twice. Okay, yeah. There you go. Good catch, folks. Good catch, Sirius and Rascal. Yeah, good sleuthing. Yeah, there you go. Okay, all right. Okay, so what have we done here? Well, we've converted our connection to Mongoose, and we've also converted our overall connection to an asynchronous function from what was originally the classic promise syntax, right? We changed it from promise and then to async await. Again, not saying that anyone is better than the other, just saying that they're just different approaches. And I think it's good to practice both so that you can use them interchangeably, like Rascal was saying. There's times when you could use both. Sometimes it depends on what code is already there, and you want to match the code that's already there. So I think it's good to be familiar with both so that you can be flexible and use what's required for the situation. Yeah, so in the documentation for the connect, it says that it has no effect, but in the official documentation, they do explicitly say to use await. However, there is the chance that that no promise will be returned, and so await. So VS Code flags it. However, they do advise using await for the mongoose.connect. But yeah, it's a little bit of a false trigger from VS Code. Oh, Ryan, you got gifted a sub. That's awesome. That's rad. Yeah, the subs have been flying thick and fast on this particular stream, so thank you again to everyone. Yeah. Okay, so we set this up as an async await function just because we could, right? We just for practice, and we also converted it to Mongoose. We set up a schema, which right now is very basic. However, you could add a bunch more to this, and we also exported our model so that we could use it elsewhere in the code. We imported it to our server, and then we referenced it to know which collection to hit when we did our find. And we found the data that was in our collection. We console logged it, and we passed it to our index.ejs so that it could potentially be rendered on the page. Driftwood, yeah, you have a question? Go ahead and ask. Passing in response render. It's just passing in the doc info. Yeah, so it's just passing in everything we grabbed out of the database. It's just passing it in as an object. Yeah. It's just passing all that back to the index.ejs file, and then so that way you can just cherry pick it out of that object as you need it. Yeah, so you can, yep, it's passing it through so it can be used in the index.ejs file. Yep. Yeah, so you could write like you could set up like an unordered list and loop through this object right here. You could loop through it and grab components and list them out. Yeah. Good question. Okay, so this was just kind of a way for us to, we spent a good amount of the stream, going through this tutorial and reminding ourselves of what async await is, what promises are, what callbacks are, that kind of thing. And so I kind of wanted to do this, make these modifications to the template as sort of a put it into practice type thing, right? Because it's all well and good to do a basic tutorial and just do a bunch of console logs, but how can we do this in real life to illustrate some usages of async await in the real world? So I hope this was helpful. That's really all I wanted to do on this particular stream, is kind of update this template a little bit, and I will be uploading this to GitHub. I want to do a little bit of cleanup on like the instructions and that kind of thing. So I won't be uploading it right now because I think some of the instructions need cleaned up now that we have Mongoose in place, and I want to put some comments and stuff. But I do hope this was helpful to illustrate, promises, async await, and kind of remind ourselves of the structure of a full stack application. Yeah. All right, so let's maybe queue up somebody to raid. Feel free to ask any more questions if you have them. I don't want to kick anybody out. I just want to look at potential raid targets. Yeah, safety vest. And definitely we did in Sunday stream safety vest. I don't think you were there. In Sunday stream we did a fun full stack app that one went really long. That was a 5-hour stream. But yeah, we did a full stack app with all the bells and whistles. So yeah. Driftwood, you could do it manually inside of Mongo Atlas itself. You can that's kind of what I did just for this, is I just manually said insert document and created a couple test documents that match the schema that I set up. Or you could set up a post and do it that way and just call your schema and call your model with your schema in it, and so that way it'd be really easy to just drop some documents in there. Yeah, you can insert straight up, absolutely. Yep. Is there more about Express templates in the last stream? Yeah, Bumpy Lips, yep. Yeah, we did a schema in my last stream as well. That actually did something versus this one, which is more of a test schema. Okay, let's look at a little raid here. Yeah, I hope y'all had fun. Okay. And also too, before I forget, before everybody drops off, I'm planning on Friday. I am planning to do a gaming stream. So up until now, I've really only done educational content. But yeah, on Friday, I'm planning on streaming Stray, the new game where you play as a cat. I'm sure it's been flooding Twitter for the past 24 hours. So yeah, I have it downloaded. I even opened it up just to check and make sure that all my graphics settings were good and everything, but I haven't played it yet because I'm waiting for you all. Because I want to I want to touch it so bad. I want to start playing, but I'm waiting until Friday so I can have a gaming stream with you all and experience it. So much self-control. Yeah. Also, lack of free time helps too, but also, yeah, self-control is a component. So it's gonna be on PC, not console, yeah. What time? That's a good question. It'll probably be another like evening Eastern stream. I might go as early as like 6 p.m. Eastern. It's gonna be between. I'll probably start between like 6 and 8 p.m. Just keep an eye on my Twitter, !Twitter. If you don't already follow me, that's where I announce time and schedule and topic for all these streams. Yeah, so check me out there, and I will definitely be announcing the time on Twitter. I won't be saying anything about this on the 100 Devs Discord just because that's not the appropriate that's not what that platform is for. So don't expect to see any announcement on this on the 100 Devs Discord. That's an educational platform. It has nothing to do with gaming streams. But do check Twitter for that final time. I just know it'll be somewhere between. It'll be on Friday, somewhere between probably 6 p.m. Eastern and 8 p.m. Eastern. Yes. All right, good. Well, so any suggestions on somebody to raid? I see that the Primogen is streaming as well, and another person, Midnight Simon, they're streaming as well. Do a single code war during the stream, it counts. Good try, but I don't think so. So any suggestions? Otherwise, we might just go ahead and raid Primogen. what Midnight Simon's doing. It looks like Primogen is just playing Among Us, so yeah, let's go ahead and do Midnight Simon because they're doing some leak code. So we'll go ahead and raid them. All right, folks. Well, I will see you all on Friday for my gaming stream. Well, actually, no, I'm going to see you all tomorrow for class. Hey, Groenarg. Yeah, absolutely. Join us. Good to have you here. Class tomorrow, exactly. Yeah, I will see you all tomorrow for class, Friday for gaming, and then Sunday for my back to regularly scheduled educational content. Oh, well, grow an arc. Type exclamation point 100 devs in, or sorry, exclamation point Leon, Leon in chat, and check out the Discord. Exclamation point Leon. There you go. Hit up the Discord and join us for class tomorrow. It won't be on my channel, so that's why I specified, using the command. And yeah, follow Learn with Leon on Twitch, and we will have class tomorrow evening with Leon. So yeah, see you there. All right, let's hit up Midnight Simon. I will see you all back here again very soon. Starting the raid now. I'm so hyped for class. Me too. I'm ready, man. I am ready. Raid is queuing up. And here we go. See you later.